The Major Series makes its way to the midway point of the season. It's summertime for the 2020 campaign as the top drivers in the European region get all set to go to race for 2.4 hours in the French countryside at the Circuit de 24 Hours de Le Mans. Welcome everyone to today's coverage of the Major Series European Split Le Mans 2.4, live on RaceSpot TV and the iRacing Esports Network. Drivers are getting all set to go for Hyperpole qualifying to set the top grid for today's Pro Split. And we're here to cover it from green flag to checker flag, along with your racing action here from the French countryside. Justin Prince alongside Noah Rempel with Samil Aurora with you as well in the booth today. Paul Smith is also in the director's seat for today's action here from Le Mans, France. Plenty of excitement for these drivers today, getting all set to go for 2.4 hours. One of the longest road course races of the season, first 2.4-hour road course event since Daytona earlier in the season. But these drivers are set for a different challenge today here, Nolan. Hyperpole qualifying.
Absolutely, Hyperpole qualifying currently underway with the top 6 of each class decide to shoot it out and see who will start on the front rows of their respective classes. Currently, of course, you do have your LMP1 class on the field. This is Joshua Wolf, as you see, still throttling his way around the track, just going through the first series of corners. And the LMP1s, they are, of course, the fastest class out of 3 today. LMP1s, LMP2s, and GTEs. And this will be a perfect time to show you just the speed that they can carry through some of the faster corners, especially in that final sector.
These drivers have 30 total minutes to set their fastest qualifying laps to set the top 6 for each of the respective classes. Keep up with where your favorite competitor is. Be sure to go to racespot.tv/timing2 to keep up with all live timing and scoring for today. But today also brings some different drivers into the fold compared to what we've seen the past couple races, Samil. It's been oval racing for the past few weeks, back to the road courses, and which means some of the drivers that we see so talented on the road courses are in Hyperpole qualifying today. We also have a few drivers going for one-off attempts this event today. Samil?
Yes, indeed, that can change things quite a bit because in the last couple of races we had 2 road courses, we had 2 ovals, we had the World 600 at Charlotte, and then of course we had the Indy 500. So now it's a bit of a change here at Le Mans, so adapting back to all of this can be a bit tricky. For those coming in for a one-offs, of course, they have the upper hand that they didn't really have to race in the last 2 oval races. But that said, for the regulars, for the regular drivers, it's going to be quite a fun challenge, and I'm sure that they can prove that they are good drivers on the road courses as well as the ovals. Yeah.
One of the drivers going for a one-off today is on your screen. This is Monar Peter that's currently racing today. He's also going to be competing in the same class with Cyandra, and Cyandra, a notable driver, mind you, one of the sim racing aces, Nolan, on the campaign. Both of these 2 drivers were the 2 quickest in 3 qualifying sessions throughout the week.
Absolutely. So, of course, Cyandra, a force to be reckoned with for sure, especially on these road courses. You see him currently now getting into one of the slower sections of the track in his Audi R18, and it is going to be a very tight qualifying run, as it usually is here in the Major Series. Certainly cannot wait to see what he's going to make for himself here.
Mind you, these drivers just made their way on the racetrack a few minutes ago, and it can take some time to get up to speed, to be able to get to the start and finish line, to be able to start your said lap. But with all of these cars today, these drivers will have to make sure they maintain the heat in their tires for Hyperpole qualifying. The classes today, the LMP1s, the GTEs, and the LMP2s will all be on the circuit here today, Samil.
Oh yes, indeed, and this multi-class action should make it actually a rather fun race to watch out for, considering the fact that it's not really a major endurance race, say like 6 hours, 8 hours, or maybe even 24. That should actually bunch up the field quite a bit, and we should be seeing a good sprint race here at Le Mans. And in fact, having multi-class action, we will see the LMP1s actually close in to the GTEs at some point, so that should be another element to watch out for. But frankly, I'm expecting some really good battles between the LMP1s and especially the GTEs. With the LMP2s, yes, sometimes they do disappear off into the distance, but trust me, at this circuit, some really good things can happen, that's for sure.
Now, to reset how these drivers are lining up for Hyperpole qualifying and on the racetrack, Monar Peter, David E. Baker, Joshua Wolf, Cy Andra have already put in times. Then Jacques Show and Travis Henderson round out the 6 drivers who will be in their respective cars today. That's for the top fastest class today. Compare that as well to what we'll see today in some of the R classes. The GTEs will feature Dallas Pataska, Marcus Niskanen. Also lined up as well with Tommy Vandergaard, who will be going for a one-off today. Nicholas Skeets running with the casual team for Kinetic Racing today. And Stefan Overgaard, one of the noteworthy drivers from the Nordic region. One of the top drivers in the Nordic Le Mans Series this past spring. Will be in that class. While for the final grouping of drivers, they're in the LMP2s today. That's Gabriel Roos, Dawson Brock, Christopher Ems, Isaac Snyder, Eric Mickey, and Riley Thompson rounding out that group. A good core of drivers in each of those 6 classes. 18 total drivers will be in each class today for the 2.4 hour Summil.
Oh yes, and that should make it a lot of fun because, of course, 18 drivers, 2.4 hours. All that you can expect here is a good, proper shootout. And having that on a track like Le Mans, which is actually one of the longest circuits in the world pretty much, it should make it quite a fun thing to see. Especially around the Mulsanne Straight, you'll have multiple cars taking the tow from each other and then making moves into the chicane. And one area that I'm really pretty intrigued about, would be the Porsche curve section, because these prototypes, they can really fly past over there. And so having an 18-car grid literally going at it for, let's say the most part of the 2.4 hours, I think that should make it for quite a fun race over here.
Qualifying 1 with Gabriel Roos and a few others as they make their way around the racetrack. This is Christopher Ems as well. And the 11 machine, 3:31.5. That is currently about 1.1 seconds behind Riley Thompson on the first lap. Now, Summil, when it comes to this racetrack, what makes it so tricky to try and make your way around this circuit, whether it's on your own for Hyperpole qualifying or whether it's in a pack of drivers here at Le Mans?
Well, the one thing, especially in the Hyperpole qualifying, that should make a major difference is the sheer length of the circuit. It can go on for around, what, as you can see the lap times, 3 minutes and 17 seconds. And that's a long time to keep your concentration in for. So if you say are at a shorter circuit like the Nürburgring GP layout or something like that, you only have to keep your concentration in for around 1 minute or 30 seconds or something like that for a good qualifying lap. But here at Le Mans, you have to keep it in for a long time, and especially at the straight, you can actually zone in when you're inside the race. And it's happened to so many drivers in the real race that they just forget where they are, and the race engineer is constantly chirping inside the rear and telling them, okay, we have to pit now. But the drivers fall into a zone at the long Mulsanne Straight, and that can be something that can cause major incidents and also cause the driver to slow down a little bit. So that is one thing to really watch out for. And when it comes to traffic, well, this track looks really wide when you have but when you actually have 2 or 3 cars right side by each other, it just feels so narrow. So avoiding traffic, it's going to be a critical part over here to try and win the races, especially in the prototypes.
More times popping up right now. Cy Andrew, the quickest in his class right now with the 3:16.257. While Peter, Baker, Henderson, Wolf, and Show round out the top 6 in that class. Then you have Thompson that currently leads in the LMP2 class. Ems, Dawson, Brock, Snyder, and Mickey rounding out that group. And then you have Tommy Vandergaard as the only driver to set a time in the GTEs. Pataska looking to put his name up on the board. Overgaard currently about 1 second behind his fellow Kinetic driver. Pataska bumps Overgaard with a 3:48.4. Remember, they still have at least 15 plus minutes to set some times.
Oh yes indeed, Dallas Pataska, I mean, we saw last time out at the Indy 500 that he's quite a good driver on the ovals, but he's showing it right here as well that he's a good driver when it comes to the road courses as well, setting in a good lap time there in the Hyperpole qualifying session. Remember, of course, we still have 14 minutes left, and with all these drivers from the different classes coming in and setting their lap times, I think we should be in for a rather fun finish towards the end. David E. Baker is the driver who we are focusing on right now past the chicane, and this Mulsanne Straight can get really long.
Remember, all these drivers trying to set their fastest times for the 54-car grid for today. And knowing each time there's qualifying, drivers do have the opportunity to have an extra qualifying session if they so choose by donating to charity. This race's charity for this week is Fight Colorectal Cancer. Pardon me if I mispronounced that one. And their charity and their acts was important for the major series to raise money for charity.
Oh, absolutely, and especially all the charities obviously going to a good cause, and every week that this series comes to iRacing, nobody ever backs down from donating for that extra qualifying session, especially if they didn't get the run that they wanted to. And of course, with all the proceeds going to these charities, it is of course a very good thing to see, as while the times continue to drop down the board as we continue to ride on with David Baker in his Audi R18 as he throttles it down these very, very long straightaways where we'll be seeing a majority of our overtakes today.
Of course, that's in reference to colorectal cancer and the charity that raises money for the cause to try and cure that, which refers to both rectal and colon cancers. It's the second leading cause of cancer death in men and women combined in the entire United States. And have many different events throughout the year, including virtual climbs to the cure, as well as many other ambassador events. To find out more, go to fightcolorectalcancer.org. Let's follow on board with some of the race cars as they try and make their way around for qualifying, approaching 12 minutes to go in Hyperpole qualifying. That's David E. Baker that's making his way through the Porsche curbs at the moment. One of the trickier parts of this racetrack, mind you, to try and get through cleanly. There's been a few drivers who have potentially have an off tracks in that. In fact, this past lap does not count, did have an off track on the circuit here, Nolan.
Yeah, you never want to see that when a driver has an off track, especially if it's right in the final section of the racetrack. It's so easy to do, though, in, of course, the Porsche curves and even these final chicanes. Very easy to get those off tracks, and it invalidates the entire 3 minutes of work you had leading up to the lap. And you can see just how close it is. I mean, even in your LMP2 field, you got Gabriel Roos who's with a 3:29, and then of course Riley Thompson with the time that's half a second down. But honestly, you cannot say that that's a big gap, as we usually say on a road course, because when you're at a track this long, that is not that big of a gap at all. I mean, look at Joshua Wolf with a .083 difference between him and Peter up in front, as this is of course Tommy Vandergut driving one of the Ferrari 48 GTEs for Kinetic Racing. His best lap has been a 3:47.549 right now. His set on the last time by, so that has put Tommy at the top of the charts for the GTE field. And of course, he's doing a good job to hang on in here. This is, of course, the driver that's currently at the bottom of the grid, Nicholas Skeets, also driving for Kinetic Racing in his Ford, as he's going to cross the line right now to likely put in a time of his own.
And Skeet, keep in mind, you see the name down there, runs for Kinetic Europe Casuals, was somebody that ran a lot of races in 2019 in competition for the Major Series. This time going by the name under the casual approach for this season and this event today. Riley Thompson, he's now your quickest driver though in the LMP2s. That time at 3:29.225, about 6 tenths quicker than Gabriel Roos.
Well, that right there is just a fantastic lap that he set in off Le Mans, and especially at qualifying over here, as you look at him just going sliding around over there as the sunlight just peers through. It is just such a fascinating lap time, this one. He's just broken the barricade over here, and well, that lap time just completely puts him up atop of the field in comparison to the others. And Riley Thompson, of course, one of the regulars. We've seen him do quite a good job in the other races. In this HPD though, he's just doing a superb job at Le Mans. The question is, can he actually maintain that for the rest of the 2.4 hours? That's going to be one really tricky thing to watch out for, as Gabriel Roos from the Kinetic Europe team comes into the pit lane.
Remember, with Hyperpole qualifying, you are not allowed to come back on the racetrack if you come into pit, whether it's for a crash or not a crash. In other words, you must stay on the track if you want to continue recording times. You can't come in for tires then come back out on the racetrack, Nolan. This is something we've seen in a couple different series recently, and it's in play here today. Most of the drivers, in fact, for the LMP2s have elected to end their qualifying sessions.
One driver that is still out on the course still for now is, of course, Isaac Schneider, one of the bombshell racing machines, and he's still trying to improve. Right now, the bottom of the pile, as you see, less than half a second off of Christopher Ems up in 5th place, but 2 seconds off of his class leader, Riley Thompson, as see a bit of a swap for position up near the top of the pile as well. So Syandra looks to go top of the boards with a 3:15.652. So good run there for Syandra. As well, now going to look down to Stefan Overgaard running in the Kinetic Europe Junior team in his beautiful looking Ferrari.
And Overgaard, a really quick driver, mind you, for those who have watched broadcasts on RaceSpot TV, was one of the premier drivers in the Nordic Le Mans series a few months ago, and this is his best car, is this GTE machine. Can maintain speed on the road courses, can be very consistent, was normally a top 5, top 10 driver in that series, and has also in a few other series shown flashes of that speed. In other words, Samil, he's someone who might be a contender for today for the Major Series European Regions Pro Split.
Absolutely. It should be so much fun to watch Stefan Overgaard right here in this Ferrari, trying to make something happen in this rather competitive GTE category. And if you can do that, I think towards the end with the regular drivers as well, it should be a pretty fun race to watch, because of course we've got so many regulars who are coming back from an oval race. Wait a minute, that's Overgaard actually pulling into the pit lane, so I'm assuming that his qualifying is done right here actually, Justin.
And this is a sweet spot we talked about, Nolan, in qualifying before a little bit, where if you stay out for too long, the tires, you're not going to be able to get faster lap times. Most drivers find that on the second or third lap, once those tires are up to that particular amount of heat, they start cliffing and starting to drop off by a few tenths of a second.
It's absolutely usually about the 2 to 3 lap ranges. That's when the tires are at their prime condition. See, even Riley Thompson, he doesn't see the need to extend his lead because he's over half a second up on second place Gabriel Roos right now. So he's going to like to stay down in the pit lane for now. But Nicholas Skeets still out there on the circuit in his Ford GT and still trying to get a better lap time in. I'm not sure he's definitely not going to be good enough for pole here, though, as that lap time is going to be a good 4 minutes. That's probably almost 15 seconds up from what he needs to be if you wanted to go for a pole position in your GTE field.
Yeah, but remember, that's 11 seconds off. Here's one of the things that can pop up too, is drivers may elect to try and slow down and heat up the tires by going not as quick and trying to just run and burn some of the fuel off. May have been the case for Skeets to try one more time to just cool down the tires just enough, Samil, to be able to push on one final attempt before he goes off to the pit lane.
Absolutely, and you just want to find that sweet spot with the tires and the fuel as well. You want to keep your fuel as low as possible without running out, and those tires in the right temperature. Because of course with these GTE cars, if you don't really do that, if the tires are just a bit too hot or a bit too cold, one push of the throttle in the wrong way and your car could just be oversteering out and spinning right on you. And at a circuit like Le Mans, with the barricades are never too far off, that is exactly what you do not want to happen. Skeets though, heading in for a good lap time over here. And it should be fun to see what he does at this qualifying session. Oh my goodness, there's a bit of bumping going on there.
And that's Markus Niskanen, who pulled right over to the side of the racetrack, and that's exactly what we were talking about there, I believe, in part. Pulled over to the side of the racetrack, just off the racing line, and he's having a bit of a struggle. I think that's his end of his session, yes.
Well, I think he actually got hit on the back end of the car, because you saw that car jumped a little bit, so I almost feel like one of those cars hit him while he was in the midst of sitting there on the racetrack. Taking a look back now as we see what happened to Markus Niskanen. He looks like he was pulling off, like you said, Justin, trying to get himself sorted for another flying lap, as he had a couple of LMP2s flying up on him here as well.
You know what? I think you know what he did? He, I think, realized he was not supposed to pit. And he ended up coming down. No, he came down to pit, Nolan. And came back on the racetrack, and before he took a lap, realized he had to get off the track, and that's why he pulled over to the side. That's exactly what we're talking about. Still, pulled over to the side.
Yeah, it pulls over to the side, and you saw one of the LMP2s did run into him. He might not have enough time now to get another lap in, because he's got to get out there on that out lap. He doesn't have the time to do it now, as see Dawson Brock, who's going to elect to take it down to the pit road, so he's effectively going to give up his qualifying session. At this point, if you come down to the pit road, you are not going to be able to get yourself another lap out, because you need to have that time to get the out lap in there, on top of a flying lap as well. Now, of course, this is group qualifying, so you will have time to finish your lap, but you need to be able to complete your out lap before you can even get on that flying lap. But right now, Travis Henderson is still out there, potentially looking to improve.
Yes, indeed, on board with him right now, 3:17.7. And one of the main things when it comes to these types of qualifying sessions, normally for a massive group here at Some Hill, is a lot of times drivers like to stay with a group of cars for the straight lines. Here's the thing, with there only being 6 cars a class, it's easier said than done. In fact, mostly everybody has been given space throughout this qualifying session. They were advised to do that in the race meeting.
I think it has a plus side to this as well. So although you may not really be getting all the draft that you want on the long Mulsanne straight, in the corners like the Bosch curves and the initial S's that you have all the way down to Tete Rouge, it just gives you that extra bit of clean air to go past even faster in qualifying as Travis Henderson comes through to start one final lap here for Le Mans, trying to see what he can do in this final qualifying lap. We'll stay on board with him. He's currently in P5, around 1.9 seconds down from Andra, so it should be a rather good lap for him to put him anywhere up to the top 3. However, it's a tricky circuit to master, and well, if he's just got the tyres in the right temperature, that just may be doable for him.
See just how much wheel has to be put in this part of the racetrack alone and how technical this can be. We're looking to gain a lot of time. Did have a 4-minute 7-second lap the last time by. See how this goes here. Back down the straightaways.
Thundering back down the Mulsanne straight, which is of course one of the fastest straightaways in all of motorsport. This is why this track is known as the fastest racetrack in the entire world. Thundering up to the first chicane now in the Mulsanne straight. Of course, these are only really here for safety reasons, because originally back in the 60s, there were no chicanes here. This was a long blast down the straightaway. In fact, you can even run this track with no chicanes on this section of the racetrack on the surface as well. And it's good fun, I will say, having yourself a good little drag race down here. But for now, Henderson now thundering up to that second chicane.
Still has about 1 minute and 18 seconds. Remember, in these types of qualifying sessions, drivers do get the chance to have, give or take, a couple minutes to complete their official lap they're currently on, so a few drivers are within that range in the second half of the racetrack. Now, our director, Paul Smith, we mentioned him. He has a ton of race experience at tracks such as this. I believe you have a fun fact about this racetrack too, Paul.
Absolutely. So, hello everybody. My interesting fact about this track, which none of you are allowed to steal for the official race in a few weeks' time, is that the Mulsanne Straight is the same length as the entire Sebring International Raceway. That just puts into perspective how long this track is.
Wow, these are the kind of statistics that really make the legend of Le Mans what it actually is today. I mean, when you think of back in the olden days, you used to have drivers blasting past the Mulsanne Straight right down in the night with no chicanes at all, and you never even know which car was right ahead of you because the headlights, of course, weren't even powerful back then. So, well, it just really adds to the legend of this circuit that really has actually inspired so many generations of racing drivers to come here and actually take the challenge. But one man who's doing that pretty well is Travis Henderson. He's still on his current lap, coming past the final sector, and look at him go over there. He's just ripping past all the corners. How good of a lap is this going to be, though? We're going to get the answer rather soon.
And they have been given 5 minutes to complete their current laps they are on, so he, along with a few others, are taking that opportunity, it appears. Let's see if this time ends up counting. Clipped a bit of the grass, though, heading through the final chicanes. Remember, looking to try and bump up a 3:17. The pole time of the class is a 3:15. This time by 3:17.1 does improve it, but it doesn't get him anywhere higher on the grid. P5 is where he will line up.
Riley Thompson on his final lap now, already past the 3-minute mark as he thunders past the Corvette curves and now approaching the Ford chicanes, what will be the final time in this hyperpole session. Thompson's already pretty safe with a 3:29.226 and almost half a second back to second place. He's just trying to see if he can improve, bouncing through the Ford chicanes and clattering the curves across through the final apex, and across the line is going to be a 3:29.135. So he does improve and officially puts himself half a second up on Eric Mickey down in second place.
See how Peter responds, meanwhile, with the LMP1s driving for Impulse Racing today. The European-based driver, one of the final drivers who will get a set of time. The driver behind him, David E. Baker, did have an off-track during this qualifying lap. His best time, again, a 3:16.120, and he elects it's not going to be fast enough, pulls off the racetrack. David E. Baker, who was behind him, does continue to keep going. We'll see if this does count. No, he'll also pull off to the side.
Well, interesting bit, this drivers are actually finding out that the lap times just aren't good enough. Well, some of them are still trying to go on, but the others will realizing that it just doesn't make any sense. Christopher Ems crosses the line, improves a little bit, and he goes up to P4. So that gap between Ems and the others is now 1.476 seconds. And that is actually quite a big lap over there, big gap over there. So hopefully the gap isn't as big in the races, but for qualifying, that's a major gap right there.
That means it's the end of hyper qualifying. All these drivers all set to get racing for the main event when 54 drivers hit the circuit at the 24-hour de Le Mans here in Le Mans, France. With that, let's take a look at, again, how they will line up after the hyper qualifying. This is the top 6 specifically, how they will line up. The full grid we will run through once in a few moments or so. Cy Andra, Monar Peter, Joshua Wolf, David E. Baker, your top 4 in the LMP1s. Travis Henderson, Jock Show round out that grouping. Then the LMP2s, Riley Thompson, Eric Mickey, Gabriel Roos, Christopher Ems, Dawson Brock, Isaac Snyder round out that class today. With the GTEs, very interesting qualifying order. Tommy Vandergont starting on the pole, Dallas Pataska, Stefan Overgaard, Marcus Niskanen, Nicholas Skeets, Claude Belval round out the top 6 for the GTE class. With that's all they'll line up for the top 6 after hyperpole qualifying. Drivers all set to get going after this. You're watching the iRacing Sports Network and RaceSpot TV for the Major Series European region.
Coming up to the line, being chased, and it was Braden Johnson. Unbelievable finish. It was 1/1000th of a second between them.
Green flag in the air. We are racing in the 2020 24 Hours of Daytona.
They go door to door for the feature race lead here on the last lap of the race. Side for the race lead in the final corner at Homestead.
Down the back straightaway, 3 wide again for the race lead. This is unbelievable stuff here tonight.
Loma is going to have to be very deep on the brakes, and he is very deep on the brakes. It's side by side through the corner. This is for the win.
It'll be side by side. Davies low, Ottinger high. To the very inside is Garrett Lowe. 4 wide at the stripe. Orly's win here on this outside line. Neck and neck. Who's going to back out? Does anyone back out? Verstappen starts to squeeze on the inside, and now he'll try and straight line it. Goes under the apron. Drag race to the line. It's so close to call.
We are back at North Wilkesboro, North Carolina, where the field is rolling out for the start of today's 400-lap race on this .625-mile racetrack. And just as the field comes around turn number 4, the sunshine peeks through, helping warm things here. Bill Elliott leads him down. Benny Parsons on the outside. The green flag flies, and the first Union 400 Winston Cup race from North Wilkesboro is underway. Everybody nicely through turns number 1 and 2 as Bill Elliott has the lead and Dale Earnhardt has jumped into second position, followed by Benny Parsons and Bobby Allison. So here we go. It's just about to go away. They bump coming out of turn 4. Earnhardt gets the lead. We had just heard from our spotters that Neil Martin. Earnhardt is on his last lap. This will be his 24th career win. Dale Earnhardt wins the first Union 400 at North Wilkesboro. Carolina, where the field is rolling out for the start of today's 400 lap race on this 0.625 mile racetrack. Here's the starting lineup. On the pole from Dawsonville, Georgia, in the number 9 Coors Ford qualifying and Winston Cup race from North Wilkesboro is underway. Everybody nicely through turns number 1 and 2 as Bill Elliott has the lead and Dale Earnhardt has jumped into second position, followed by Benny Parsons and Bobby Allison. Second win of 1987.
It's the iRacing event that needs absolutely no introduction. 33 of the world's best sim racers, 200 laps, 800 corners, 7 pit stops, 500 miles, and a shot at sim racing immortality. It's the 11th running of the iRacing Indianapolis 500.
Simulated racing can be awesome, but it can also be kind of a free-for-all. Interestingly, auto racing faced the same problem in its earlier days. Whether it was on the back roads, the beaches, or the city streets, the racing was always fun. But there was always a certain level of chaos or danger, until some folks Simulated racing can be awesome, but it can also be kind of a free-for-all. Interestingly, auto racing faced the same problem in its earlier days. Whether it was on the back roads, the beaches, or the city streets, the racing was always fun. But there was always a certain level of chaos or danger, until some folks came along and put some order to all of this. Stuff like official racetracks, regulations about weight and equipment, and enforcement of standards. That's what gave us high-speed excitement, fast-paced action, and photo finishes. That's when racing became racing. The guys over at iRacing.com have made the same transformation in the world of sim racing. See, iRacing analyzes the performance and results of each driver in every race, so you can be sure you're always placed in races where the competition will be tight and that those reckless drivers who ruin it for us all will be kept in the pits. Not to mention that with members in over 130 countries already in their vast community, you can find races day and night, so you can always get in the action. You can even join a league of your favorite series and work your way up to one of 7 world championships, offering over $500,000 in prize money. And since updates are always automatic, you don't have to worry about software and can focus on the track. Zip up your fire suit and check out iRacing.com.
The most realistic online racing sim ever made. This is iRacing. Detailed laser scan tracks, fully dynamic, real world cars, and over 50 series to choose from. 6 online world championships offering over $400,000 in annual prizes. This is the original esport racing game. This is iRacing.
Welcome back, everyone, to today's coverage of the Major Series European Region Pro Split as we get all set to go for the Le Mans 2.4 here on RaceSpot TV and the iRacing Esports Network. Justin Prince, Nolan Rempel, Samuel Aurora with you, Paul Smith in the director's seat as we get ready to race at this 13.5, 8.4 mile circuit. The temperatures much hotter than they were just minutes ago for Hyperpole qualifying in the early morning as the sun starts to rise here at the racetrack today. All these drivers set to tackle 38 total turns across this racetrack, Nolan, with 54 registered cars all set to take the green flag in less than 3 minutes.
54 drivers around an 8.5 mile racetrack. It's definitely always a sight to behold when you get, a field of even just usually above 30 cars on a track like this, but then you up that by 20 or maybe even twice the amount, and you're in for a real treat. So 55 drivers, like you said, getting set to go, and this is going to be a fun one. You can just see it coming.
This is definitely going to be very intriguing for today's round, absolutely, especially the difficulties of this racetrack. Samil, we've seen some good laps in Hyperpole qualifying, but as mentioned, the track conditions are a little bit different. And the racing, of course, adds an extra bit of flair here at the racetrack, especially when to manage the traffic you talked about, as well as having slipstream in a lot of cases being one of the main benefactors in this race today.
Yes, indeed. In the early part of the races, when you have most of the cars bunched up with each other, you're going to see that slipstream being used quite a lot down the Mulsanne straight. And remember, this race essentially is only a 2.4-hour race. So for this one, a lot of the cars, you'll see them sticking right next to each other for a very, very long time. So the battles at Le Mans, especially through the areas like the Porsche curves and the Mulsanne straights and the chicanes over there, should be a lot of fun to watch. It's one thing to set in a good fast qualifying lap time, but maintaining it for 2.4 hours, it's going to be a completely different ball game. And the guys who can ace it, well, they're going to have a big prize to take back home from here.
And for a lot of drivers, mind you, they're trying to earn as best points as they can if it isn't their strong suit today, Nolan, because the points battle, we were talking about this before, tight top 5 separated by 125 points entering today's starting grid, Nolan.
Absolutely, it is still tight as ever at the top of the championship board. Of course, this has been the case all throughout the season. It's been nice and close with each other, and right now, João Valverde is in the lead currently for the European Pro Split, and right behind him is, of course, Eric Mickey with 96 points, and just a little further down the order is, of course, Joshua Wolf with 111, rounding out the top 3 in the point standings for now. So it is going to be very interesting to see what's going to be taking place here today with that.
Lots to talk about as today goes on. Again, 2 hours, 24 minutes of racing about to get underway here on the iRacing Esports Network from Le Mans, France. These drivers all set to take to the starting grid for today's action. Let's see how they will start off for today's action. Once again, Hyperpole qualifying set the top 6 for each class for today's action. All drivers now ready to make their way towards the grid, with Cy Andrew leading to the green flag in the LMP1s. Monar Peter starts in second with Joshua Wolf and David E. Baker in P3 and 4. Travis Henderson and Jacques Shaw start in row 3 with Diego Jimenez Hormilia in P7. Kurt Crum rounds out the top 8 with Ross Banfield and Jens Kaiser in the top 10. João Valverde, currently the points leader for the series, is in 11th. Cordell Cologne 12th. John Lane, Thomas Peterson, Ty Kevitt, Benjamin Gregory, Ray Partridge, and Daniel Sharp round out the drivers in the LMP1 class. Nolan, you have the LMP2s.
I do indeed, and it's Riley Thompson to start things off on pole position for the LMP2 field. Eric Mickey down in second place, with, of course, Gabriel Roos and Christopher Ems, both for Kinetic Europe, in third and fourth. Dawson Brock and Isaac Schneider in fifth and sixth. Seventh and eighth hold Alexis Federu and Lucas Euler. Ninth and 10th is going to be Jean-Francois Arsenault and David H. Baker. Alexander Trudeau and Darwin Mintz down in 11th and 12th place. Uldis Puteklis and Marcus Romer in 13th and 14th, with Trevor Vobrowski and Franco Scuri in 15th and 17th. 16th place, evidently not quite able to make the grid, with Adam Fetchy-Pompi rounded out the 18-car field.
Let's look once again at the LMP2s real quickly. Drivers starting to roll. This is the lineup for the GTE class today. Tommy Vandergont, Dallas Pataska, Stefan Overgaard, Marcus Niskanen, Nicholas Skeets, Claude Balval, Brande Fabrice, Nick Rowland, Pierre Goratio, along with Linux Dominique Droulet. He's starting from the pit lane. Alexander Weigert, Thomas Anderson, Marcus Hagman, Mike Gott, Pontus Nielsen, Rene Aurora, Michelle Hagstrom, and Colin Martzoff are the 54 drivers in the field today. As mentioned, a couple drivers are electing to start from the pit lane today. That is Dorlet along with Pierre Goratio. They will both start in the lane today. But the LMP1's ready to let the loud pedal go here in France. 2 hours and 24 minutes of racing action just about to get underway towards the final section of the racetrack. Your final thoughts, Samil, before we take the green flag.
I think the start is going to be so much fun to watch out for. We've seen it so many times as the fighter jets just fly past the traditional bleu, blanc, rouge colours of France. I think the start with the LMPs is just going to be so much fun to watch, and as the race progresses, I'm expecting a lot of good battles going on primarily in the GTE field. Bring on the 2.4 hours to Le Mans. This should be a lot of fun to watch.
You can hear the jets all the way from inside the cars across the circuit with a brand new sound system for iRacing instituted this week. But these drivers are ready to go racing and let their own motors make some loud noises. With the final chicane, green flag is out. We're underway for the Mon 2.4. And a clean start for the LMP1. Cy Andra in first. Peter, though, already under attack. Wolf side by side with David E. Baker. That leads that class as they are off to a clean start in that grouping. Then you have the LMP2s making their way down the straight. One car did go off the racetrack. That is Baker, who went off the circuit, and a couple others.
Yeah, there was a lot of contact that I think might have been made down in the middle of this LMP1 field for the front runners. Dive bombed into turn 1 and then sent 3 of them spearing off the racetrack. That's going to move Henderson all the way down the order into 18th place now. Ray Partridge has stopped and David Baker spun again. That is down over in turn number 2, down at the in turn 3, as the LMP2 field now trying to throttle its way by.
2 different drivers locked up the brakes. Those drivers went off into the sand trap, still trying to keep on going. But Riley Thompson leads the LMP2 class with that craziness. They will have to deal with the traffic of the LMP1s, trying to regain some time on the track now. Mickey, Ruse, Baker, I should check that, Curley in 4th, Christopher Ems rather, in that said class. For the GTs, meanwhile, very different signs because the leader has ran away. Second on back, though, is in an absolute gaggle of cars, including some drivers really slow. That's Dallas Bataska with a problem. Slowdown penalty for the 23.
Oh, that's going to impact Dallas Bataska so much. He's one of the series regulars who's done a fantastic job in every single race, but the slowdown penalty definitely does not help his cause. As we see more and more cars just easily going past, and on this Mulsanne straight, you just want a lot of momentum, and for Bataska, that slowdown penalty just curbs every single bit of chances for that. Right, it's going on here for the LMP2s. The HPD cars, of course, trying to battle it out a lot. Jean-François Arsenault is the one trying to make a move. Not quite the chance of here into this opening chicane. But just coming back to the start over there for the LMP1s, I kind of expected them to be a bit more cautious and then to go all out in the Mulsanne straight and all that. But, well, at the start, a lot of cars decided that, you know what, it's only one life, I have to make it work. And it just doesn't work out right there in the first lap. With cold tires and everything, things can go horribly wrong, as it did right there, Justin.
Indeed it did for some of those drivers in that respective class. Mind you, there were some adjustments to some of the cars' tire compounds with the most recent iRacing update. So drivers are still adjusting to some of the changes as well, so a bit to the dynamic track. Taking a look now at the GTEs, this is up towards the front still for P2. That's Overgaard trying to work with Nicholas Skeets, 2 of the Kinetic Europe machines, looking to run away from Marcus Niskanen and company.
Yes, indeed. So Skeet still on the loud pedal, trying to run down Stefan Overgaard. You still have Vandergut up there in the 802 machine, trying to pull away with the class lead, and he is doing so in great fashion in that Kinetic Ferrari. This is allowing second and third right now to really hang back, but Marcus Niskanen is closing the gap. One of the LMP2 machines has gone off. That's Franco Scuri that went off. I think that was down to Indianapolis, this was. So what happened here? It was an overshooting the braking point. It was by a big margin, went straight on, locked the brakes up. Good job on Scuri to not hit anything, so he's just going to lose a bit of time and get some overheated tires, but apart from that, he's going to be safe and sound.
Talk about licking the stamp, that's completely missing the mailbox. Trying to submit the letter, absolutely, in that situation. Our battles, though, 3 wide. That's Valverde trying to gain a lot of positions in the middle line. That was Ross Banfield making the pass 3 wide, meanwhile, in the Simability machine.
Yes, indeed. So Ross Banfield and Valverde are regular series drivers who are just trying to make up moves as much as they can in the opening part. Remember, it's a common trend here at Le Mans that in the opening hour or two, you have a lot of drivers, a lot of cars staying right next to each other. But as the race goes on, the cars can just disappear from each other. And I think that's a good opportunity. That's something that Banfield and Valverde really realized. And they just wanted to make their moves early on to try and maximize the impact that they can make on this race as such. Banfield there going 3 wide and executing it perfectly, and that's just a good example of how you can actually make moves work heading into turn 1, unlike that rather complicated start, of course.
Several drivers, mind you, here, Nolan, have already had slowdown penalties for respective problems. Others have already had to come for the pit lane at least once. They do have 1 fast repair available, Nolan. Here's the thing, though. You do not want to have to use it just 5 minutes into a race.
Absolutely you don't, and this is a battle that's going to get all sorts of tight down in turn number 1 at the Dunlop chicane as Thomas Anderson is forced to yield against, one Alexander Weger, who just pushed his way through up into 7th place. So This is currently the battle right now for 8th on the circuit, as you can see Weger, 8th and 9th right now. These guys duking it out with. So Thomas Anderson just completed the pass on Grande Fabrice in that 836 Ferrari. Two Ferraris do battling now as they throttle their way back onto the Mulsanne straight. No slowdown penalties for either of them this time around. So this is going to be now a heads-up match for Fabrice, who is no doubt going to try to make a move here on Anderson. Down to the corner, that's one of the LP1s that's just gone off up ahead of him, and he's going to tow it back to the pit lane. So what in the world has gone on here? This is, of course, one of the LP1s. That's Thomas Peterson. He had just come out of the pits, mind you.
He had just used his fast repair, having some trouble in the opening laps. Was trying to stay out of the way, I think, but problem is, you can see how many bumps there are in the grass and spins right across the track.
Oh, it's gone horribly wrong for Pearson right there in the opening minutes. And look at that, there's carnage all around the track. That's Franco Scuri, who just went wide only a couple of laps ago. He's in the gravel once again. So he's trying to make a move down into the chicane. Oh, taps the car right there. Just couldn't get the car slowed down enough. And here he is, Scuri, into the gravel, trying to think about what actually went wrong over there. So again, that can really happen when you're braking a bit too late and trying to make that move through. You can make mistakes like that. In fact, for Scuri, it just went horribly wrong. Normally, the car up ahead would be damaged by that as well. But for this time out, Scuri was the only person getting it completely wrong. Now, though, the GTEs are getting really excited. Skeets and Roland, this is the battle for P4 as we see a cone being kicked out into obscurity over there. Skeets just try to attack in that Ford GT, but the Porsche just keeps the position for now. That said, there are a couple of overtaking corners coming up, and Skeets can make the move here with a good draft.
Of note, Dallas Pataska as well in this class, who had that slowdown on the first lap, had to come down the pit lane on the second lap. That was in the pit lane for 49 seconds with an issue. He is now way behind this battle after being one of the top 5 drivers in the point standings. Still, though, you can see with the slipstream, you have to be able to be good on the corner exits, especially, though, to be able to maintain slipstream, or else you get reeled back on in. A bit of a dance up in front of them from Niskanen. Now makes it a 3-car group. More trouble. This is Gabriel Roos having to let cars go.
So Gabriel Roos having his own issue in the Kinetic Racing LMP2. So what happened to Gabriel Roos? This was down at the Porsche curbs, and has he just run wide? He has. He clipped the curbing, went all sorts of wide, and almost brought that car to a stop. That's a bit of a strange one, Justin.
Stick around with this, though, because you can see this is Isaac Snyder following on behind as well. This is moments after that. This is entering towards the Ford curbs, just about a little bit of hard curb to the left side. Tire sends him off to the sand.
Oh boy, that just happened so many times. If you're just trying to get a little bit too aggressive, and if you just lose your momentum a little bit, things like that can happen just so easily. These final chicane sections that we've got here at Le Mans, they're just such a complicated, this is just such a complicated section to navigate, and you just get your turning in point a little bit too wrong. And if you can just get a throttle positioning just a little bit too wrong again, it can go all so wrong for you. That aside, though, the LMP1s are a class that are not hesitant in fighting it out. Kirk Crum is the driver who's trying to make moves. He's in P4 at this moment, and he's fighting it out for that precious podium slot. Here he is, trying to reel him in, gets a good draft, goes to the outside line, to the left-hand side, and Crum easily using the draft makes the move through. So that can be a characteristic feature about Le Mans. Sometimes the straights are just too long that you're able to get the moves done a bit too easily, as we now come back and finish off the Mulsanne straight right here.
And there's a reason, too, as well. They added those chicanes for safety issues back in the time. Remember, though, there is something called the hybrid boost, Nolan, on the LMP1s that gives them that ability to be faster down some of those straightaways.
Absolutely, and it almost works in a sense like KERS or a push-to-pass from the Formula 3.5s and the Indy cars, where you can get that little bit of extra power into the car, and you can get yourself that little bit more speed and get a pass done a lot more easily down the straight. So I think it's safe to say that Kurt Crum may very well have used some of that hybrid boost, as now you can see, though, Diego Jimenez Formula under threat by Jacques Chou for 4th position now. Chou looking to the left side of the racetrack as they approach the Porsche curves. They're going to be side by side. This is a very fast portion of the racetrack. Chou forced to back out of that one, and Jimenez going to run wide. Chou runs wide. They're still duking it out, trying to get through as they now approach the Corvette curbs as well.
Back and forth a little bit here, and Samil, you have something to add when it comes to this as well.
Absolutely. It only makes sense that if the Porsche goes, a Porsche stays ahead, and that is exactly what's happened over here. But the Audi, of course, it recovers the boost in the corner, so it could be attacking right here, down heading into turn 1, past the first chicane. It's all good right here, past the second one, and this is crucial. The exit right here can make a major difference on his chances making a move heading into turn 1. Not exactly the cleanest exit though. I think the chances of making a move down into the Dunlop chicane seems a bit tricky for the Audi at this moment in time. That said, plenty of overtaking opportunities lie up ahead of the circuit.
And keep in mind, as one driver off the circuit missed their line, that was Joshua Wolf in the backdrop. Yes, loses a couple spots in the 12 machine. Rough corner entry, and you'll see right here, this has been a trouble spot today. Locking up the brakes by trying to carry too much speed right about here. This is what happened on the first lap, mind you.
Ooh, and look at that, nearly cleaned out that kinetic car that was just up the road ahead of him. That was unbelievably close for Wolf, and I think that might have been Yal Valverde, I want to say, that was right ahead of him, and he can thank his lucky stars that Wolf managed to back that car down the way he did, or he would have taken out both of them. Now, though, the battle is back on as we thunder down the Mulsanne Straight. There's a look for position down the inside, and likely going to get himself clear almost by the time they enter the chicane. Battle of the late breakers, and look at that, managing to overtake right the outside. He slides off hard into the wall. Wolf just throws it away, and that's going to have to be a visit to the pit lane for sure.
Significant damage now to Wolf's car. And something has to be going on with some of the brakes for there being that deep of braking right there. Completely missed it, trying to wheel it on the outside of one of these chicanes. And a hard hit in the Mulsanne Straight.
Well, that's exactly what happens. It's just like a price war in a business. You just go, oh my goodness. And just as I say about that, it's Gabriel who's getting the braking wrong all over again at the Dunlop chicane and just heading out into the gravel. It's been a rather tricky race for him so far. I mean, he's been having so many incidents, and getting it back on track over here in terms of the entire race is going to be a bit tricky for him. But that just reminded me of a price war in business. You're just trying to go low, 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 and low until one guy just can't simply bear it. And that is exactly what happened at the chicane. Trying to brake a bit too late, and in the battle of the late breakers, as Nolan mentioned, things just ended so wrong for one of the drivers right there. Now this battle for the GTEs is going on. Seats and Niskanen, these guys have been going at it for quite a long time. And remember, both of these cars are Ford GTs.
He's separated by 0.4 of a second. And over the past few months, the popularity of the Ford GT has made a comeback with some strong performances in some of the Pro Invitationals. Has been also very good in this series' competition in the European region. When you think back to the Daytona 2.4 Nolan, these cars were very sporty at the Daytona International Speedway.
Well, they absolutely were, and not just in the Daytona 2.4, but in the Daytona 500 as well. You saw these Canetti racing guys constantly running up front, but now they're trying to see how their GT racing field will play out once again, as Ford's running a line astern and trying to run down one of the Porsches. As you see a Ferrari overtaking a pass behind. That's Grande Fabrice in the 836 completing the pass on one of the Fords just behind him. That was Claude Belval. They just go around these straight on, keep it out of the barriers, and I think he might have just barely glanced off of that with the right side of the car, but that's the second car we've seen gone off at that same chicane, doing the same way, too deep on the brakes in the span of just 60 seconds.
Here's the look on board, and you can see right there, missed the second part of the apex for the left-hander, and that sent him off the track, and just the sand carries the momentum forward back into the tire barrier. Car still has a bit of damage, but still is going. Lost a few seconds at least from that contact. Very minor damage.
Yeah, that's a rather strange accident there for Grande Fabrice. I mean, you don't really miss the second part of the chicane so easily, but there must be something going wrong there for Grande. But again, Grande is not the word that he'll say after that crash as well, because Grande in Italian, of course, is more of a positive word, and that accident right there was a rather negative one for him. Strange to see that happening, but I'm sure that he'll be able to get back on track rather quickly. 2 hours and 10 minutes left in this race, and the start has been rather complicated so far, as we have one of the LMPs coming into the pit lane, and of course it is Joshua Wolf.
And I think it's becoming a clear trend now at this point here, Nolan, that drivers are trying to carry way too much speed in some of these chicanes and some of these passes, and in turn, it's led to some of the biggest mistakes of the race.
It certainly has, and Joshua Wolf is, of course, the biggest player in all of this, as he's the one that's right now down in the pit lane after he hit the wall so hard that he actually bounced off of it a little bit. taking a ride on board with Christopher Evans in his HPD LMP2 as right now he is trying to reel in Jean-Francois Arsenault in the car just up the road from him. This is the battle for 7th place right now on the racing surface. 7th place, of course, in class, and well, it's going to be 23rd overall. So it's certainly a great battle for Ems as he's still having a good go. I think he's running at the top 10 in this class so far.
Yes, indeed, P8 as we fall on board with him. Quietly having a solid run so far, to say the very least. Currently, that is Arsenault that he's trying to draft off the back end, mind you, right now. This is for 24th overall as well in the field. Currently, the speed difference just reached a bit of a buffer, and this is now where fuel saving also comes into play. Mind you, strategy was a major talking point for the Daytona 2.4, where drivers try to cut out a stop or stretch their fuel to be able to underfuel the car for the final pit stop. So some drivers in groupings such as this, some may want to pass, others are trying to draft out the back of one error and waiting potentially to the next chicane before they make a move.
Well, Vavrovsky is one guy who definitely didn't want to sit behind in the draft. He went into the chicane and got that move done. As we see, though, Vavrovsky is under some tremendous pressure. This battle is actually getting out of hand. They're going side by side, heading into the second chicane right here. It's going to get a bit tricky. And he just gets it done. So Vavrovsky has to settle back in for P9. Oh my goodness, that is some actually good hard racing. As we see one of the cars right there just going a bit wide. And this is the sort of action that I actually expected from the HPD LMP2 cars. These guys are just in such fantastic racing machines. The battling in these ones can be actually quite enjoyable. So far so good, but actually, as Justin mentioned, sitting behind in the draft trying to use as little fuel as possible can be quite a smart strategy for the long run, because remember, oh my goodness, oh boy.
He hit him.
He did.
That's Darwin Mites. That ran to the back of him. Really trying to set it hard. Way too much speed in the brakes, Samil.
Well, thankfully, it was only the cone that got obliterated and not the car right in front. My goodness, Darwin Mites is coming in hot and hard, heading into the Mulsanne corner. Hits the cone. It's the other car, but thankfully the damage is more for the cone as well. So somehow Vavrovsky survives this one and Mites just makes light contact. Wow, that got rather heated over there.
You can see what he was trying to do, I think, though. He almost looked like he was trying to get the cone in, now he's spinning. Well, there go the tires just like that for the 72. There goes 2 positions as well to the right side.
There was one car up there that also nearly lost the back end as well, and luckily managed to keep it out of the barriers, but just barely. That was a very, very close call, though, as well in the business of all this. This was Marcus Romer, who was just up the road, and we're going to watch here, sees the car up ahead of him, and right here, gets on the curbs. That actually just up ahead of Romer here, the car that lost it. Potentially, Uldis Puteklis that lost the back end, and we'll get another look at this here. Comes through the Indianapolis corner, season spinning, goes wide into the sand, and that car fishtails, and how did he keep it out of the barrier there?
And mind you, it's so easy, Samil, when it comes to racing with these types of tracks, to see someone getting loose in front, then you get double loose, and then the car behind you gets triple loose, before, of course, somehow stays stable.
Well, carnage beats carnage, and at a circuit like Le Mans, we're actually driving a lot depending on your flow. That can happen. If it's a more stop-start circuit, you actually have quite a bit of time to react. But a circuit like Le Mans, especially in that section where you have the Indianapolis and the Indianapolis corner right there, I think it gets really tricky. So somehow Puteklis is saving it in, and he might be getting some good tips from Alexander Rossi over there, because that was a top-class save that we saw right there. Now, though, battle for the lead. Leaders on the traffic is Sayandra and Molnar Peter. This is the overall class lead in the LMP1 category, and the gap, Justin, is only down to 0.4 of a second. This is getting really hot and spicy around here.
They've been 2 seconds quicker than the rest of the field the whole time. One of the cars behind them, Marcus Hegman, did just spin out, though, for Force Esports, and one of their first major road course events. So unfortunate for the 645. Remember, that team came away with a huge victory in the World 600 on the oval side.
Indeed, a big victory for Force Esports as he just loops the back end all in the zone and kisses the arm club area just the smallest bit on the left side of the racetrack. Luckily, didn't actually get it going before too much damage is done to the car. I don't even see any damage on the front end of the car, so it looks like he will be fine, but this battle for the race lead picking up big time as they're ducking their way through traffic. That is all sorts of close. Now ducking back around the Ford as There is no way that these guys can keep this going for long. We might see a dive bomb here as Molnar Peter closing into the back end of Cy Andra. Now Andra getting held up through these 4 chicanes, and this is not good at all as Molnar Peter, this is exactly what he wants to see. Can he get on the throttle? No, he cannot. Cy Andra with a much better run.
Can confirm a second DNF now in the LMP1's Joshua Wolf is officially out of the race after his troubles. But these drivers, we talked about this during Hyperpole qualifying. That traffic management is going to be very crucial. Still only a few more cars they have to get through, but if you mishandle any of these drivers, you can potentially not only ruin your race, but ruin the race of many others.
Absolutely, and one accident that just comes to mind with the LMP1s here at Le Mans would be Alan McNish's accident back in 2011. He was coming through the Dunlop chicane. I'll put that out for later on because Isaac Snyder has had a major incident down there. I think that's the chicanes. He's coming a bit too hot. No, he's not coming a bit too hot. He's been tagged.
That scurry that ended up taking him. That's another third time I believe he's had something go on hard braking to the corner and ended up hitting the back end of somebody. Battle up for the lead, though. Trying to make a poke now as Peter Heat gains some momentum due to some of the traffic. Bit of a bob one front for Cy Andra, still not blinking quite yet.
Still not blinking just yet. Now the question will be, can Molnar Peter get the run down on the Mulsanne straight to make the pass into the second chicane? Cy Andra will likely try to go defensive if he wants to hang on to that race lead. Peter is closing. It's not going to be really close enough to make a realistic look down to the second chicane, and he's going to actually back off, and that's a wise move there from Peter. Realizes he's not close enough, so he's going to wait until potentially the hairpin or wants to get off on the Mulsanne straight before he tries to go for the pass, but he is definitely closing in that gap.
Stefan Albergard, though, passed right on by on the left side of the racetrack. And again, there's that gap growing. Mind you, Cy Andra, one of the talented drivers we talked about for Satellite Racing, working with Dallas Pataska and a few others today. Dallas Pataska's had his issues today after showing speed in Hyperpole qualifying, but Andra, one driver ready for a one-off from the Sports Car Opens in that series. The SCO specifically showed really good speed in that particular series as we follow on with more drivers cutting through the traffic.
Oh boy, it's getting really exciting down here at the Mulsanne corner. 3 or 4 cars right there in the proximity of each other, and that just makes for such a fun battle. Now though, I was coming back to the point with the traffic, and as you can look at the screen over here, it's just a classic Monday morning traffic jam going on at Le Mans, except it's only Sunday right here. It's getting all a bit tricky over here with all the GTEs coming in, and it just gives you a good idea about just how fast the LMPs are. That only in around 24 minutes they've been able to just entirely chew on the lead and have been able to come so far up ahead, with the GTEs just struggling to stay in the same light. Look at that, so many cars in one frame, and the battle for the lead can get really tricky over here, because now though, you don't just really have to battle out against your direct rivals, it's also the traffic that you have to get done with. So, and when one of these guys actually acts a bit unpredictable, God bless you, just make sure that you're able to stay on the track, because then things can get rather tricky, as they are getting right now in this battle, as we see.
Indeed, right now the driver in the middle of the screen once again is Kaiser, trying to close back in on Ross Banfield. We talked a little bit about championship point standings. Ross Banfield, 4th coming into today with 2 victories on the campaign and 2 top 5s, 121 points back. With the trouble today for Joshua Wolf, chance he can at least get up to 3rd position if he keeps his car on the racetrack to the halfway point.
And of course, Banfield was in the race lead he was in the championship lead for a good portion of this early part of the season as well, but then had an absolutely detrimental race during the World 600, and just, if there was something that could have gone wrong for Banfield during that race, something went wrong for Banfield during that race. So it was a massively unfortunate event for him, and now he's really almost playing recovery driver now, trying to take back his championship lead right now, running 7th in the LMP1 class, trying to run down Jacques Chou just ahead of him.
Here's the downside for him. His championship leader at the moment, Valverde's up in 4th position, is one of the quicker cars in the 2nd grouping, 2 seconds back of P3. That's currently about 4 seconds up the road from where these drivers are shuffling near 2 to 3 wide through some of the traffic. Jacques Chou had to back off the gas a bit more. That might open up the door for Ross Banfield.
Here we go then. Here we go then. This battle for the LMP1s is actually getting really hot and spicy right here, heading into the chicanes. They're looking to make a move using all the draft. Oh, slips down in, and this is some fantastic racing. Will they overshoot the brakes though? Thankfully not. The battle is still going nice and clean, Justin.
Change for the lead up the road, though. Just up the road in the second chicane up the Mulsanne straight. That's Molnar Peter who makes the move on Cyandra. Take a look. Just got close enough to get in the slipstreams. Harvested enough energy for the pass. And off to the point goes that car. Keep it on replay, because right after that, you see how close Andra got. He recovered back to get the lead right on back in the next corner.
So the battle for the lead is definitely on. As you can see, Molnar Peter went full on defensive, and Andra had to complete this one around the outside of the racetrack as they throttled their way over the hill and then right down to the Mulsanne hairpin. And there you see it, right in the braking zone. Andra got him back, and this is going to be, Molnar Peter is not going to lead the lap. He's going to have to try to find it another way. David Baker has also had some issues, as we are hearing. So what happened to Baker? He's gone really wide. Oh dear, bumps right over the bumps and takes on one of the Ferraris as well.
That's one of the kinetic cars, one of the top runners in the GTE class. That was your leader specifically that has some damage. That's Tommy Vandergaan who got hit. He's now in third position with significant damage.
Oh boy, look at that car just jumping over the bumps. And Justin, I remember you speaking about how tricky the bumps on the grass can be. And Tommy Vandergaard, just an innocent bystander right there, getting involved in all the drama. And now he just has to nurse his car back and recover. And it's going to be a long recovery drive from him, because that damage and that pit stop can take a fair bit of time to repair. And just coming back from all of that, well, that's going to be so tricky. It happens. It just happens in traffic when you're just so close to other cars. Things like that can really catch you out, and that is the danger of Le Mans. It is such a tricky, such a tight and twisty circuit that any incident like that, even though you may not be involved, can just take you out for the worst. And now for Tommy Vandergaan, things are just getting worse down here.
Very unfortunate for Tommy. Had pulled away a couple seconds minimum for the rest of his teammates. An iRacing member since 2013, won the Daytona 2.4 hours before with the Endurance 5, was a champion in various other different sim series, now is off the pace for the time being. Second, meanwhile, up for grabs. This is in the LMP2s. Eric Mickey battling with one of the drivers with the one-off. That's another one of the satellite racing machines looking to say hello to the top spots.
So Federo continued to try to find his way around Eric Mickey. Mickey has, of course, been a front runner all season long, so he is, of course, doing a great job running second place right now in that LMP2 class. But you can see Federo has been gaining over half a second every one of the last 3 laps. 1.3 seconds, though, on the last lap alone. So he is really in that gap, and Federo wants to go. Makes the look down to the inside. This is going to be bold. Mickey forced to back out of that one. Mickey realizing it was not worth going that aggressive on defensive this early on.
And it's pretty clear from what we've seen so far, if you're on satellite racing, you're wanting to be up in some of the top positions. Mind you, though, Riley Thompson, in their respective class, he's ran away by more than 6 seconds since the drop of the green flag with the clean air. With all the fighting, here's the gap, 5.9 seconds officially. However, did gain 2 seconds last time.
And that is just a sign of proper domination. If you just compare the gaps in the other fields, let's say in the LMP1s, you've got Cyandra and Molnar Peter separated by just around half a second. In the GDEs, you've got Stefan Overgaard and Nick Rowland separated by just around 1.3. But in the LMP2s, that is quite a dominant performance right there by Riley Thompson, with a gap of around 6 seconds this early on. I think that is just turning out to be one of the most stellar performances that we've seen. Of course, the LMP2 category has been no short of drama, with so many drivers getting things wrong, getting into the gravel, and perhaps outbreaking themselves a bit too much. But that said, there's another battle going on here, and this, if I'm not mistaken, is for the overall class lead. Cyandra is out here battling it out once again, and, well, Molnar Peter is on his tail, and he just doesn't let him go. It's just a wonderful love story, this, and these two guys seem like they won't be separated for the next 1 hour and 54 minutes, it seems.
Now keep in mind, as a little bit of a bad corner, though, for Peter, with a bit of scraping coming off the corner, that we talked a little bit about the hybrid system. How that works essentially, though, is you can harvest energy about 5% on average, some drivers say, per straight, up to 30% per braking zone. It's not as simple as, oh, you press a button, you instantly go faster. You have to save the battery in that said hyper or hybrid system, Nolan, to be able to utilize it for passes.
And this is why I like to relate it to stuff like KERS, because KERS, for those that do not know, it's known as the kinetic energy reduction system, which takes excess energy that's stored up when you brake and it puts it into the engine. You only get a certain amount of it, you can use it per lap. So that's why I like to oftentimes, compare stuff like this hyperboost to that, because you do need to save the battery and stuff when you're under braking, so you can actually have hyperboost that you can actually use. You don't have an infinite amount of it, which makes it such an interesting fact that it's in these cars, as battle is definitely on, though, for 4th place in our GTE field as we take a look at this gaggle of cars. 4 cars right now in this train, and all of them wanting 4th place badly.
Absolutely, this choo-choo train trying to battle, and take a look as well how these cars have separated out in some groupings. Bit of a cluster for some of the cars that you see once again.
Oh, one of them just spun behind them.
And 2 of them are stopped now because of the spin. That is Pierre Gondoratio, who has started from the pits, and Marcus Niskanen, who ended up getting tagged in that.
Oh boy. We just kind of expected something like that to happen for the GTEs, and here we are, and all of this is just kicking up right here in front of us. Niskanen spins around and just hinders the progress of all of those behind him. The Bombshell Motorsport car, well, he's able to recover somewhat easily with not major damage, but boy, that does hamper the progress of so many other cars right behind him. And well, that just seemed to be rather normal. I think it's only the Ferrari, the pink Ferrari, in fact, of Pierre Gershon, if I'm not mistaken. I hope I haven't butchered that name, who just got slightly hindered, but the gap has just spread out, and these guys will have to put in a Herculean effort to try and close up with the guys who are right in front of them. It can be done. There's still a long time left in this race, though.
Approaching an hour and 52 minutes to go on the clock, just about 30 minutes or so into the action. Still, though, the rest of that choo-choo train still looking to fight, and guess what? They've reeled in 3rd position. Venergaunt, remember, still driving with that damage until they can get to the pit stop window. Then you have Weigert closing in. Then behind them, Nicholas Skeese as well is also within this draft now after that spin at the back end of the choo-choo train.
This is going to be very interesting here indeed, as Vandergut is definitely losing a lot of time because of that damage, and I'm willing to bet the majority of it is actually being lost down the Mulsanne straight, because it is going to be enough that it will have hindered his aerodynamics. And a lot of these teams, they've got set up specifically for that Mulsanne straight, because that is where they know that a majority of passes are going to be complete. So you need to have your car set up for top speed. Even in real life, a lot of the prototype teams, they have setups that are specific to this track and this track only. They're known as Le Mans setups. Sometimes the cars will look completely different between runs, and now you can see as Vandergaard under attack from Alexander Weigert is going to complete the pass down the Mulsanne straight. Vandergaard has absolutely no top speed in that car anymore.
Significant aero damage on that car at this point. Remember, these drivers still have estimated for their class about 29 laps to go this upcoming time by. So it's not as simple as, okay, I can come down, because that will throw them off the cycle, Samil. And in that case, it might be the difference for them between winning and losing, and they might have to serve another pit stop on top of that to be able to make it on the fuel after.
Absolutely. I mean, battles in the GTE field are a bit like an oligopoly in economics, when you've got so many people just tightly bound to each other in a certain strategy. When you actually have to pit a bit early, you just get lost in, and it just hampers your progress a bit too much. Because sometimes the most efficient strategy, the most efficient way around, is to try and stick with the leaders and try and stay in the same cycle. A pit stop now could actually make them lose a lot more time, because of course, if they want to stay on the same cycle, they'll have to put in a mega conservative second stint right there. So that just makes things rather tricky, and in fact they may lose out a lot more time just conserving their tires and conserving their fuel in that particular stint. So might as well keep on going as it is right now and hope for the best, as we see the car cycling back into the pit lane. That is Benjamin Gregory, if I'm not mistaken, in the Porsche 919, who comes down to pit road.
Yeah, a couple drivers are pitting in the LMP1 and LMP2s, and this was something that popped up. The fuel burned very quickly at the drafting track at Daytona in the Daytona 2.4. What can be the case today for the LMP1s and LMP2s, because some of those class drivers are coming in just about 9-10 laps in, the ones specifically who have been running on their own much of this run. Compare that to some of the others. If you stayed in a draft, you might be in decent shape. If you're Rick Mickey off the corner, as long as you stay within the draft, you can recover from that nearly botched corner. For the others behind them, That was a bit crazy for being where Nielsen and co were.
Absolutely. So that was, of course, Pontus Nielsen, and the driver that's just behind him is Grande Fabrice, and they're trying to have their own battle, and this might get a bit intense here. He's got an LMP2 that's ducking their way through, going 3 wide. There is a Ferrari behind this mess as well. He's trying to find his way through. Colin Martzov in the mix of things as well. So this is a 3-car battle for 13th. That is all sorts of close through the kink, and you don't see that every day. Down the corner through Indianapolis, the pass is going to be done, but I think... I'll tell you what, Pontus Nielsen is on the hunt, nearly running him over down into the corner as, oh my goodness, that was all sorts of close there for a minute.
A little bit terrifying, to say the very least, in that battle. As seen, it got a little bit crazy coming out of Barrage de Mulsanne, but now looking like they finally calmed on down for the time being as we follow on board with the Scandinavian driver, another one of the drivers a part of Force Esports. As they look to make a statement on the road course side, many of their drivers oval aces for the European base team.
Well, here they go past the Porsche cars. This is a rather technical part of the track as they now have to navigate through a bit of traffic as well. Battle going on once again. Oh yeah, that is Diego Jimenez Omea. I think he just runs wide at the exit of the Mulsanne corner, if I'm not mistaken. We know that's not the Mulsanne corner, that's a chicane. Oh my goodness, he gets really... It is Mulsanne indeed. Just gets in all sorts of trouble, misses up the braking, slides a bit around and ends up in the gravel. Thankfully though, these LMP ones, they just have enough power to drag themselves out of the gravel. But for Olmeyer, just trying to make the move, got a bit too nervous, and here he goes into the barriers with no chance of coming back and making that move immediately.
You've seen at the start of that replay, mind you, that before he even got to the brakes, mind you, to try and slip the pass, he knew something was going on. Pit stops, meanwhile, are going on, Nolan.
They certainly are. So pit stops, while we continue to watch these two LMP2s from Kinetic underway, I do want to mention one thing about that battle. He was trying to have a look up the inside of the Mulsanne hairpin. The challenge with that, besides it obviously being a downhill braking zone, the track narrows up from about 3 or 4 lanes to 2 lanes, and that doesn't help anything either. So you really do have to be very, very careful when you're on the braking zone there and just skating across the track. And once again, the sand, you're not turning that car at all. Syandra is down in the pit road, and second place is just behind him.
And this is all the OMP1s coming down, as well as some of the OMP2s for their respective pit party. As this has all gone on with the leaders now in the pit box, should know Marcus Niskanen did spin around once again in the Mulsanne straight and smacked his front nose into the Armco barrier. He's back and going as everyone's coming in for their scheduled stop. Now, based on the math, that's only about 11 laps they can go at this point here, Samil, per stint. That's not a lot of laps, mind you. These drivers can make it about 33. That's at least a couple more stops.
Exactly, and with these LMP1s, they may be the fastest, most complicated machines in the world, but trust me, when it comes to burning fuel, well, these guys are just proper gas guzzlers. Syandra now comes back up ahead, and now there's this battle going on between Niskanen in this GDE category. Well, Niskanen is the guy in the replay. You spin my head right round, baby, right round. That's exactly what's happened to Niskanen, facing the wrong way at the exit of the chicane. And I wonder what's happened over there. Perhaps he just got on the grass and spun all the way back around. We'll have to see, but certainly it's not going well for him right here. Couple of cars coming in the pit lane as well.
Indeed, as we see Niskanen now in P10, here's an air glance at what happened on board.
So look at what happened with Marcus Niskanen in his 4GT. Just lost it right on the exit all by himself, and then smacked that Armco barrier. Not too much damage, but we've seen that it doesn't take a lot of damage to really hinder your aerodynamics, especially on these very long straightaways. As Niskanen now right on back though of one of those Ferraris. I think that's Michael Hagstrom in the Ferrari that he's trying to get around right now. So he is still finding himself mixed up in these little battles, and well, it has been a bit of a tricky one for Niskanen as he's right now on the back of Thomas Anderson. This is a battle, though, and one car bailing across the chicane. That was Jens Kaiser in the LMP1 field that just bailed out in a fight with, I think that was Jacques Chaud that he was battling with as they thundered their way across the chicane. And that might very well be a slowdown penalty for Kaiser.
Yeah, Kaiser definitely missed that part of the SS show. Ended up nearly making contact, trying to stick and give the squeeze. Like, though, we'll see if they have to sacrifice the time in that circumstance. They do also have Isaac Snyder now meat in the sandwich, so to speak. And of note, the helmet officially for Isaac Snyder is a mustache that is on a crash dummy. So, able to keep it safe that time. By the way, more pit stops for some of the satellite racing cars.
Right, so the LMP2s are now starting to come in to make their pit stops. Again, a good point mentioned in the chat that they've actually corrected me, and I think that's a very fair point to mention that the LMP1s are actually quite efficient, but they have smaller tanks. But it's still, of course, as race cars, they do chuck up quite a lot of fuel as well. But of course, that is one thing to watch out for later on, because on the field right here are some GTE cars going in for battle at the chicanes. Well, I love this thing about GTEs. They may be a bit slower, but they still do tend to produce a lot of good battles. And this battle, of course, is the one for the lead. Stefan Overgaard and Nick Rowland, the Ferrari and the Porsche, going down the Mulsanne straight. And things could get really tricky over here. The gap, of course, is down to around 9/10 of a second. And with that craft, with that slipstream, it could actually come down rather quickly.
Remember, though, there's also the fact that there is the potential of dirty air that has factored in a couple battles. Rowland kicks away to curb. Gains a little bit of time on the curbing this time, but right about here, this is where drivers start to dance around a little bit. Back inside the draft. Really good corner complex for Rowland. Trying to gain as much time as he can, believe, here before he gets towards their first pit stop window here.
Now, going back to your dirty air comment, Justin, I definitely agree. And the place where this is, most apparent is in the Porsche and the Corvette curves, but especially the Porsche curves. As Rowland running wide into the gravel, so that's not going to help him at all. He's going to lose quite a lot there, actually over a second of time lost through that off-track excursion, but the Porsche curves are such a high-speed section of the racetrack that you cannot follow somebody in the draft there. I've seen battles where, even for that LMP1 battle for the lead, where the gap was down to as little as a tenth on the entry, and it's backed off to about half a second in the span of just 3 seconds, and that is because of the dirty air. You cannot follow somebody nose to tail through the section of corners, especially if you're in this prototype field, which, by the way, even through that pit cycle, they've still stuck nose to tail.
Andrew got a good pit launch off the exit. However, with the help of the draft, Peter kept within range now to once again try and pounce in the Impulse Racing machine. Most of the laps have gone the direction so far of Andrew and company. The speeds over 200 miles an hour, plus 3 miles an hour down the straightaway. 3/10 under that is the gap.
Well, just to add on what Nolan mentioned about the dirty air, I think that's a fantastic point. It's the same sort of slipstream that benefits you in the straight, and that is exactly what happens in the corners that actually hampers your progress right there. So the slipstream, while ducking behind one car in the straights, can be beneficial, but do that in the corners and you could just be losing out your gap at no fault of your own. So that is one thing that the drivers must be aware about. And at a circuit like Le Mans, which has a major combination of both of them, with big long straights and of course some really tight and twisty sections, it can be a rather tricky thing to manage out. So for these drivers, they need to be a bit smart on how to manage out the airflow, because if you don't do that, well, you could be losing a lot of time in your battle. Now though, Molnar Peters closing up on Andrew. The gap has now come up to around half a second. Andrew doing a fantastic job in the Audi up front, but Molnar is just trying to keep up with him. He's been there, these guys have been there together for quite a long time. But Peter, of course, trying to make a move not a couple of laps, of course, 5 to 7 laps ago. But since then, nothing much has happened since. Justin, we're seeing some LMP2 cars making some pit stops as well. I think that's Riley Thompson, the race leader, in fact.
Yes, that is your class leader coming in, as well as a few others. So they were able to make it a bit more further than some of the relative competitors in the class. 11-12 laps was the distance they were able to make it. So some drivers only made it about 8 or 9 in some cases for some of the LMP2s. As that's going to mean a change for the leader. That is now that 236, as well as Dawson Brock cycling up to second in the class. Meanwhile, up towards the front at that moment as well is this machine that's still yet to pit. This is the 199.
Alexis Fedorov has taken over the lead of the race for now. Of course, likely not going to stay in the lead by the time they complete their own pit stop. So the 199 LMP2 running very, very strong. Now just going to approach and duck around one of those kinetic Ferraris. Is going to move to the right side of the racetrack and get well out of the way. So I'll tell you what, this LMP2 field has been having a good little go at things. As we kind of expected, they have split up a very big margin. The closest gap right now being 2 seconds between any two cars in that LMP2 field. So they have been split up by quite a bit. Might be seeing some of those starting to round back down once we get into the pit stop window again.
GTEs are pitting, by the way, at this moment. Vandergont just came in and out. A few of the air drivers of the back half of the group also came in and out. Of note, tires were taken, and as you can see, brand new bodywork on the car. Fast repair used for the 802. Now becomes the question, Samil. Can Tommy recover the pace he had lost and drop after dropping outside the top 5 from that incident when he was in the race lead by 3+ seconds?
Frankly, if you look at Tommy's lap times, you kind of get a good idea that he's a fantastic driver around this circuit. And if he wishes to, and if the car is performing correctly, he certainly can do that. But remember, essentially, the fast repair is gone. So he just doesn't have to be fast. He also has to stay out of trouble because, of course, all the other drivers will have their fast repair, but Tommy will not. And that can play a huge influential role as we go down towards the end of this race, where things can actually get rather chaotic. So the pace is there for sure. It's only about trying to avoid chaos because he's got the disadvantage of having used his fast repair already. Now though, let's focus on this lead battle. The overall lead battle, in fact, in the LMP1s, it is Andrew still defending hard from Molnar Peter, and these guys are just trading blows against each other, but Molnar is just not getting that one opportunity where he can stick his nose up ahead and take the lead of this race. Perhaps he's just waiting and sticking in the draft, and perhaps he just rather smartly trying to conserve a little bit more, because of course when you stay inside the draft in the slipstream, you're able to make sure that you conserve your fuel a bit more.
Now keep in mind, these two teams, for those tuning in for the first time in the Major Series, are two of the one-off drivers in today's event. The thing is, though, for those who recognize them, they're from SCO, as we talked about. Two of the top teams in the prototypes in that respective class, and two teams that focus on prototype racing as their main focus. Satellite Racing, their focus in part for events such as Le Mans, is this LMP1. Compare that to the team behind with Impulse Racing. That team has finished multiple times in the top 10 and top 5 in major endurance racing and iRacing events, as well as the top 10 in points in LMP1 and LMP2 points, Nolan, in SCO competition.
Absolutely. So you got a couple guys that, don't usually run in the Major Series, but still showing that just because you don't run here often does not mean you cannot find yourself out in front. Alexis Pedro is now down to the lane, has already been in the pit lane for about 30 seconds as it is. Of course, not in the box for quite that long. Alexandre Trudeau and Dawson Brock are also in the lane behind them. So Jean-Francois Arsenault, currently running 4th place, unless he comes down a pit, is set to inherit the race lead. But Arsenault also down the lane. So is Marcus Romer from 5th for the LMP2 class. Now David Baker is the only driver that needs to come on down before Lucas Euler is going to come on down before things.
And there goes Riley Thompson right on by. Looked to be fairly close. Still, the 199 going to be at least a few seconds behind there, Samil.
Yes, indeed. So the pit stop window has just begun for the LMP2s, and you could just see them trying to cycle around, and now we get a better picture about how this race is going to pan out in terms of the strategy. But well, if you're just new to sim racing and you're wondering about what these teams are all about, well, just to clear out the confusion, they're not actually quite like the real life racing teams as well. So what happens is these drivers and the race engineers, they sit down and actually try to find a good setup for these cars, because as I think Justin mentioned early on in this race, they're actually trying to find out a good setup for Le Mans, for the track, where all the drivers can actually share information and find something good. 14 laps to stint, of course, in these LMP2s. David H. Baker in the lead for this one. And they're not just cosmetic teams just for the sake of it, where you have 2 or 3 drivers grouping in together and saying, oh no, we're a team. They actually sit down together and work on a lot of essential stuff, and that's what is actually the core of a sim racing team. Baker on his 14th lap of the stint, and I think he should be coming into the pits rather soon, Justin.
Yeah, that's the longest anyone has gone so far. The only driver in the class has not hit. He's gone 2 laps longer, mind you, than Riley Thompson. Problem? The gap is only 0.4 of a second, as you can see, because there's Thompson right there in his orange and white machine.
Thompson, should note, has come down for a stop, so he's on some fresh rubber right now with a lot of extra fuel, so he can push a lot more. I think right now Baker is just trying to extend his run out to see how long he can last it. He's lasted now. It's going to be close to an hour now. He's been out there for about 50 minutes now, as it is, from the drop of the green flag. So right now, David Baker, he's definitely trying to extend that run as much as he can. And right now, Riley Thompson does not really fight him too hard because he knows that Baker has to come down yet. He knows he's going to inherit that race lead.
Yeah.
But Thompson right now might look to get the lead done on this straightaway here. This would be the perfect time to get that one done, and that he doesn't have to worry about it when it comes to the Porsche curves.
Or like to say fuel off the front end of that respective car. That's looking like he wants to try and do that. We've seen that from a couple of the drivers where they lift about 50 to 100 feet before they hit the brakes somehow. And drivers have utilized it to save fuel instead of using the draft to push them forward to make sure they don't use too much fuel and save about a lap. Bit of a squeeze this time for one of the GTEs. But looks like that's going to bunch them up just a little bit. That's Claude Proval who's trying to move out of the way for Can-Am.
I think that the smartness is in actually trying to stick behind in the draft. And as you said, Justin, just trying to make sure that you stay in the slipstream and use as little fuel as possible. It makes a lot of sense. And then, of course, you can use that sort of conservation strategy later on in this race. Because, of course, when you have more fuel in the tank, when you come into the pit lane, naturally you'll be spending less time trying to fill fuel in, and if anything you can go for a longer, harder and a faster stint in the later laps. So that can certainly mix things out a lot, and as a smart racing driver you really want to make the best out of all these variables, because in the end this kind of stuff defines a regular racing driver from an actual professional who maximizes every single resource given up to them. Here we come though, the LMP2s are heading into the pit lane.
Yes, that's the expected pit stop there. The longest driver on a stint. And oh, look, it's also the GTE pit window opening up for all the leaders. Stefan Overgaard's in. Dorlet is in. Weger in. Many of the others are also in on the pit lane. And here's one of the advantages, too, of having a good qualifying run for some of these cars. Nick Rowland, much further up the pit lane compared to some of the others. Hagstrom just came out of the pit lane, mind you, with some of these other cars.
Indeed, so some drivers still ducking in, some drivers still ducking out. You do, of course, have the drivers that already made a pit stop. They're going to be closing this gap rapidly, no doubt, as one of the Kinetic Ferraris finds his way out of pit lane and back out onto the racing surface. So a solid run there for the Kinetic guys. They have been having a pretty decent one so far, except for, of course, save that one very, very unfortunate incident down at the down the Mulsanne straight that resulted in them getting spun around and losing out the lead.
But look at the distance now for the pit stops. 3.5 seconds is now the distance. That was despite having a slow... That was because Beauregard had a 1.5 second quicker pit stop. But let's take a run through the top 8 as we approach the final 90 minutes of the Le Mans 2.4. We'll go through that once more as we go for Race Spot Fan Immersion. That was your race spot fan immersion following along with the battle for the LMP1 race lead. Now let's take the chance to see how things have shaped out amongst these groupings so far today. Cy Andrew currently leads in a one-off along with Monar Peter in second spot. Then some of the series and regulars in Kurt Krum, Golfer Verde, and Jacques Show are inside the top 5. Ross Banfield's in P6, with Jens Kaiser in P7. Benjamin Gregory rounds out the top 8 in the LMP1 class. For the LMP2s, it's Riley Thompson in the class lead. Lexus Ferdrow is in P2. Lucas Orr is also in a one-off today. He's in P3. For Satellite Racing, Lexi Trudeau is in P4. Eric Mickey 5th, with Ems, Ruse, and Bronk rounding out your top 8 positions. Overgaard currently leads in the GTE class at the moment. That was after some trouble to his fellow teammate. Nick Rowland's in second. Alexander Weger is in P3, with Pontus Nilsson in P4. Rene Fabrice is in P5. Reject that P4 at the moment officially. That was after a shuffling of the order with Nilsson, with Gordon Ratio in P number 5 officially now. Vandergaard currently up to 6 after his pit stop. Roulette is in 7. Skeets rounds out the top 8 in the running order. That's a look at your top 8 for each of the groupings in today's race so far. An hour and 25 minutes to go in the action. Nolan, first things first, your thoughts on what we've seen so far on the racetrack?
Well, honestly, it has been a very exciting first hour of the race as we're now approaching that 1 hour mark of into this race, but it has been an absolutely thrilling one. We've seen battles up and down the order, and as I say that, BMW Mike Gunn has just gone off the race surface. That's at the second chicane there, and well, the excitement continues, Justin.
There was a bit of angry comments as well over the radio at that point for the 11 machine. Let's see what happened to Gaunt, though. For Mike Gaunt currently scored 15th in the class in his respective BMW. And the Hansen Brothers Racing Machine loses the back end.
How many times have we seen exactly that happen at the chicane? Mike Gaunt in the big BMW coming in, braking a bit too hard and a bit too hot coming actually, and it all went wrong right there. It's become a bit of a tradition actually, so many GTE cars coming in and losing their braking back here. Now though, he's just found solace right ahead of another BMW. I'm not sure about who that really is. I'll quickly come back to you on that one. But yeah, pit stop cycles continuing with Isaac Snyder coming in. I'm not sure if this is a regular pit stop though for Isaac.
That was on lap 9 of his stint, and remember, some of the drivers were only able to get to 9 laps. And he is taking tires here on this pit stop as well, so fuel and tires this time for the 874.
Fuel and tires indeed, as one of the LMP1s has gone off. That's Cordell Cologne, who's taken a little detour through the tire bundles. This is in the 51 Grizzly TFR Junior machine. He already had damage. Look at that wheel. He was already crabbing that car big time. So Cologne was just involved in an incident a few moments prior, I would think, because there's no way he's been on the track like that for that long. It was actually, this was still down in the Esses that this happened in.
Remember what happened to Joshua Wolf? This is a teammate to Grizzly TFR Jr. While in the same section that they've had brake lockups, he clipped the grass, smacked the Armco barrier. That's where the first damage came from. That broke the suspension because of the hard hit. So he was just trying to keep it straight going down the Mulsanne straight after that. The problem is, though, once he got to the braking zone, I think that car just let go once it got to the braking.
And of all the places in the world where that could actually happen, it had to be past the S's, because of course Le Mans is a mighty long track, and with some major steering column damage as we're seeing in this onboard shot from Cordell Cologne, it just becomes virtually impossible to nurse the car back home. And guess what? That is exactly what happened for him. It just is so tricky to nurse any sort of damage, let alone a suspension one, that makes your car virtually undrivable. And for Cordell Cologne, as we just saw in this onboard, things just got a bit too tricky out of hand. Bang! He goes into the barricades, and things just end right there in a major smash.
That's going to be a journey and a half to try and get back to the pit lane. Let's just say that, with how difficult it looked like even to steer the wheel to the right. He's still trying to get back to the lane, mind you. So, going to have to keep an eye on what happens to the 51 in these next few laps. Still has about half a track, mind you, to go, and is trying to go at only about 120 something odd miles an hour to keep out of the way.
I'm more concerned about what's going to happen when he approaches places like the Porsche curves, because you really need to put in some serious steering input sometimes with these cars. It takes a bit of a trip through the grass. He's really keeping it out of the way now, isn't he? As Cologne just still trying to keep that car going straight. The last thing he needs is yet another smack to the barrier. Even the GGE field is running faster than him right now, and that's saying something because he's going to go straight on here, and he's going to have to do another 3-point turn here to get that car turned around.
Yeah, that damage, because of where he hit it, it looks like any point that requires a right-hand turn, it's not going to be a fun journey. This is going to be a long trek to the pit lane, let's put it that way, for Cologne each time he reaches those sections.
Well,
and here comes those curbs.
Yes, indeed. He's approaching the Porsche curves, and if he had raced this car in an oval speedway, things would have just been rather fine, because of course you don't really have to turn right over there. But at the notorious Porsche curves, things can just go horribly wrong. Take a look at this. This is going to be big entertainment. And look at how much he has to steer just to keep the car going straight. Oof, this is some proper entertainment that we're seeing here. And of course he goes on the grass, spins around. You spin my head right round. Sorry for my terrible singing skills, but yeah, for Cornell Cologne, virtually undrivable, and now here he is.
He's finally given up.
The pit lane.
Finally posts the toe. But the toe is massive here. That's why he didn't go and immediately put on a tow truck, Nolan. He does that, he's likely sitting there for at least 8 minutes.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's absolutely massive, and I can definitely sympathize with why, you know, he didn't want to have that happen to him. But I think that off-track excursion through the grass definitely was the nail in the coffin for him, as he had another smack to the barrier, and I'm pretty sure his race is going to be just about done for today. He's got to really hope that he's got a fast pair, but he is not going to be in contention anywhere close for even a top 5 finish today.
By the way, here's a peek now what's going on up the road. This is where things have stabilized for drivers such as your points leader, Valverde. He's been very consistent today. He lost the position this lap to Jock Show. He has lost 1.2 seconds, though, to the no-emission motorsports machine, though, throughout this lap as well. And you can see through the S's, just trying to carry more speed, but has also Colin Martsoff he has to get around.
Right, so it's getting really tricky here in this battle in the LMP1s. While Valverde on the charge with a gap of around 1.5 seconds to the car right in front of him, passes the big BMW M8 GTE. Things are going all clean over here, but the question is for how long?
Indeed, here as able to get by the traffic, Ross Banfield also closing in, should note, behind this grouping. It was a 3:23.3 last time by. That was the slowest of that grouping. Speaking of groupings, here's Eric Mickey leading the train, and Alexandre Trudeau is inside the top 5. That is a Canadian driver. As the 236 looking to still fall on by behind him, that's Christopher Ems.
Mr. Trudeau definitely fighting for the glory of Canada. Finally, a driver from my home country that I can root for here. As
you had to say
Trudeau
that,
trying to throw his way around this circuit through the Corvette curves and now approaching that Ford chicane. Losing time, noted, to Eric Mickey just in front as they throttle their way now through the Ford chicanes. And, well, the bombshell motorsports machine definitely pulling away with the gap up ahead.
That can be a bit of the advantage when it comes to the clean air at this point. 0.6 of a second is now the gap amongst this group, and again, this is the battle for 4th position. And Eric Mickey's been having a very strong campaign. A major series veteran for the past few seasons, second to the point standings entering today, and right now would earn solid even points with Valverde based on where he's currently running, because remember, they will get the points at the halfway mark of the race for the respective class they're running in that respective positioning.
Yes, indeed. And Eric Mickey only 96 points behind Raul Valverde. And well, in a normal series, it may seem like that's a major difference. But in this one, in the major series, that sort of a gap can be accomplished rather quickly. Right, Eric Mickey, he has to defend. Trudeau is on the charge, but he's around 1.2 seconds behind. So things, well, the battle is sort of there, but it isn't there somewhat. It's a bit of a passive battle that's going on between both of them. And it may develop and evolve a bit more once we try to look at the strategy elements of this sort of thing. It's been a good race so far, a lot of competition going on, but there's another battle at the front, and this battle has been sort of perpetual in this race so far. Syandra and Molnar Peter, the leaders of this race, still going nose to tail with each other, and they just don't let go of each other, do they? Going past the Porsche curves now.
Well, they are two of the best that have done it here in the LMP1s, to say the very least. Peter, very experienced in the road courses. Syandra, very experienced as well in multiple different cars we've seen. Again, just as using this chance to save. Was quicker last time by half a second. But remember, they burn more fuel if they are the lead car. So Peter at this point is essentially saying, you know what? I'm going to just stay behind and back off in some of the straightaways. Speaking of chicanes, Rouge treats one like a straightaway.
Indeed. So it seems like Gabriel Roos for Kinetic having some difficulties of his own. Lost it back and actually through the apex of the chicane and then just spun him down into the sand. And unfortunately, it was not past the tire barriers yet, so he had to take a little bit of a detour and lost himself another second right there or two. So things still not going quite right for Gabriel Ruiz. And like Samil said earlier, how many times have we seen cars getting unsettled by the curbing in those chicanes down on the Mulsanne Straight? Because it's been time aplenty as Christopher Ems is on the defensive.
That's because Trudeau just lost that position. Trudeau was losing some ground, the Montreal, Quebec-based driver. So move Ems back up to the top 5. Remember, Ems had lost that top 5 position after he had a mistake during the first stint. Mind you, the Kinetic Racing machines, they had that strong last event in the Major Series, especially with the Indy 500. They look to try and repeat it, of course, today, because remember, that team has multiple different drivers in multiple different splits of the Major Series, Samil.
Yes, indeed, and that just gives them the advantage of having a bit more knowledge in terms of setup. With so many experienced drivers in your ranks, you can actually share the knowledge, share the experience, and come up with good setups for each and every car. Right. Battle for the lead in the GTE category. Nick Rowland and Stefan Overgaard, the Ferrari versus the Porsche. The classic battle that we've seen time and again in real life, and it's just materializing right here on the virtual racetracks as well. The gap now down to around 0.3 of a second with Nick Rowland. He's doing a good job staying behind as we see a bit of some cars just glitching out over there. Oh! Well, oh my goodness, that is a heavy swerve by the LMP1 car over there. And that just puts into perspective just how fast these prototypes are in comparison to the GTEs. But it doesn't matter though, because the GTEs, they may be slower, but they certainly are so much more fun to drive in as well. For Nick Rowland, it makes a lot of sense to stay behind and try to stay in the draft, try to conserve his fuel and play the long game over here. He can play the more egoistic role and take greater pride in trying to pass Stefan, but at this point, the smarter thing would be to try and stay behind, conserve your fuel, and play the longer game with around 1 hour and 13 minutes left in this race so far.
Now remember, he's been pushing too. Remember, the gap was 3.5 seconds at the end of the pit window when they came into the stalls. That gap, of course, now dissipated after closing about 0.3 last time by alone. So they are in that situation. In other words, if you are some of the riders at Porsche Sport, you're standing at the edge of your seat and cheering as they go through the Porsche curves.
Yes, absolutely. So things are looking very, very good for now as we continue to tick away at the seconds here as time starts to run further and further down. I'll tell you what, it has been a very, very good fight, but I am very interested to see what the pit strategy is going to be come the end of this, especially for that LMP1 lead battle. Because I'm thinking, and correct me here, Justin, if my math is wrong, which I wouldn't be surprised if it was, but I think those two drivers are only going to have to really make one more stop throughout the course of the race to make it to the end. And Peter, at this rate, he won't have to put as much fuel into the car, so Peter might be able to actually win this race through the pit stops.
I think you're in reference to the LMP1 lead there, correct?
Correct, yes.
That needs more than one stop. The cars you're looking at can make it on one stop.
Right, so with that in mind, though, it is still interesting because Peter does have significantly more fuel in the car at this point in time than Syandra does. But that is, of course, due to the fact that Peter has been saving. He's been biding his time, sitting in the back there. So on one of these stops, Peter will likely be able to take a lot less fuel than Syandra will, meaning he could potentially, again, win this race through the pit stop cycle, or at least come out in the lead.
He did some of the quick maths. The question is, will the math add up by the end of the race? That's going to be the very key thing. There are some drivers pitting, by the way, in that respective class right now at the 11 lap mark. We talked about Benjamin Gregory, for example, just pit from the top 10 in the LMP1 class. And here comes a bit of a run down the straightaway to the race lead. It's Peter with the slipstream. Andra now looks to try and get it back towards the second chicane to the Mulsanne straight.
Not quite though. Andrew has to stick behind in P2. Peter finally gets the move done, but for how long is the question. The slipstream over here can play a major impact. Here he comes, Andrew, going to the outside, going low. They're still going wheel to wheel, and this is the kind of racing that we love to see. Now Andrew, with no fear and trepidation in his eyes, goes for the move around the outside and slots in back into P1, saying, you know what, that is my position and I won't let go of this just so easily. And Andrew rather smartly moves back into P1. But that said, he's going to be consuming a lot more fuel as the lead car. Does it really make sense to do that at this stage? I think not.
Now here's the interesting point. These drivers are looking to be estimated to come in this time by based on how far everyone's gone so far in the class. However, at the current pace of these two, there is an estimated 21 to go. Why is that significant, Nolan? With the math you just brought up? That means a splash and dash for the final 2 laps potentially, and it might get crazy for the final pit stop for this class.
This is why I love endurance racing like this, is because it really does come down to the pit strategy. And pit strategies, races can be won in the pits. They can also very easily be lost in the pits if you make a bad call. So it's really something where we're going to have to continue to keep our eyes on this, because this battle, I feel, is far from over, and it is going to be coming right down to the checker flag. Meanwhile, Nick Rowland has overtaken the lead from Stefan Overgaard in your GTE class.
Yes, indeed he has. So that came after a lot of time trying to draft up and closing a 3.5-second gap. That was the move made through last time by through the Mulsanne straight between the first and second chicanes. Now the question is going to be, does Overgaard elect to save fuel now that he's back car? Does he try and push, since Rowan has looked very quick this stint? All but the OMP1s are pitting.
Here they come, Andrew, and of course the other car right behind him of Molnar Peter also heading into the pit lane. Well, it all depends on this pit stop right now. So if Molnar Peter actually tries to put in a little less fuel, of course, if he's been able to conserve a lot in the last stint, he would theoretically come out right in front of Andrew. That though needs to be seen rather shortly as they park right next to each other over there. And I'm really interested in this one, because once they come out, the entire complexion of this LMP1 battle could change for the better or perhaps for the worse as well. Whatever happens, we're in for a treat of a battle between these ones. And as Nolan correctly mentioned over there, this is why we all love endurance racing. The pit stops, the strategy element that sometimes can be a bit tricky to calculate, it just plays out so beautifully.
Oh, look at this.
And guess what? It is Molnar Peter who's been able to save, and he comes out in front. But what's going on with Andrew here?
That's a double stint. That's a double stint for Molnar Peter. Tires for Andrew. So Peter taking a gamble. That is a 16-second longer pit stop for Andrew by taking the tires.
This is going to be really, really huge here. Molnar Peter, like you said, Justin, taking a massive gamble on double stinting those tires. It's definitely going to help him down the Molnar straight. Not so much though through the Porsche curves. Now, Andrew's got a lot of time to make up in the first and third sectors of the racetrack. Now the question comes down, will this be worth it? Double stinting is something that we are definitely no strangers to here in the Major Series. We saw it several times in the Daytona 2.4 hours as well. But that track is not nearly as long and arguably not nearly as fast as this track is. So this is a very unique strategy call, and it could very well decide how this race plays out from here to the end.
Bit of trouble, meanwhile, in Indianapolis. 2 cars just stacked up. The 79 machine ended up spinning and collecting the 22. That's at the back part of the running order in the GTEs. But those cars just got off and going. That's Rene O'Ward that just lost his front nose after contacting Pontus Nilsson, who now has suspension damage after that trouble. Some of the lead cars will now try and pass on by after this snap.
Right, we take a look at the replay. It's all going well right here too for the GTE right here. All rather smooth, but then this is where things actually happen. Oh, wait a minute, we saw something at Mulsanne, but let's have a look at that later on, because let's focus on this Ferrari's chase cam as such. Heading into Indianapolis, this is where the trouble happened. Oh, lost the braking, did he? No, on the exit. Something happened on the exit, and he just ran wide. So it can happen so many times that you actually slow your car down for the first section, but you're just not able to do that for the second one. As we see another BMW just coming in and has nowhere to go. It's a tricky corner, that, and well, if you get the first part right, it doesn't guarantee success for the second one, and that is exactly what went wrong for the Ferrari right there.
That was the German-based driver. Raced a lot on the oval side, and bam! Says hello to the left side door. His fellow competitor, he'll have to come into pit this time due to said damage. He had trouble the next following corner we've seen off the racing surface. So now, approaching 1 hour to go in this event, you can see this is what happened just afterwards without that front nose. And these drivers getting towards the home stretch. For drivers such as this now without that front nose, they're now going to be off cycle and losing tons of time. This is, for example, the 22 having to let people go with that significant damage.
Indeed, so having to let him go, and that BMW is missing its entire front clip, and he can thank his lucky stars that he is not racing at night, or it would be a massive problem for that BMW, as having to let by this LMP2 machine and definitely struggling in doing so at the at the Corvette curbs. And I'll tell you what, it's has not been pretty, shall we say, for a few of these drivers. It's been a very attrition-based race for a few teams, but for now, it is looking like things are trying to get themselves settled down for the end here.
Bobby Thompson, meanwhile, by the way, is your LMP2 class leader, driving for Simsa Esports today. It's been looking very powerful today. It's a 6-second gap for the class lead for him. He's been able to run away from the satellite racing cars that are currently 2 and 3.
It's just been such a commanding performance from Riley Thompson. And sometimes it happens in endurance racing that you have one car that completely pulls away, doesn't put a single foot wrong, and nails down their strategy as well. If you take a look at this particular race from Riley Thompson, well, open the textbook, turn to page number 32. This is a perfect example of how you actually carry out an endurance race. Mind you, the race isn't over yet. 1 hour and 4 minutes left to go. But if things go the way they have been for Riley Thompson and his team in this LMP2 category, they're in for a rather dominating finish towards the end. As Molnar Peter with that gamble, I'm actually curious to see how that pays off in the end, because of course the LMP1s, Molnar Peter took a major gamble by trying to double stint, and his stop was considerably smaller than that of the other car right there that we saw. Right, so how does it play out in the end? I'm actually quite confused. So Syandra, he is taking fresh tires, he will be faster for sure, but how that plays out in the end is something that really intrigues me, and I think it will just make for such a fun finish towards the end.
Gap shrunk down to about 11 seconds now amongst those drivers, but here's again one of the things to think about. Cold tires have been very tricky since the new build, and drivers are taking some time to get used to that. That, remember, is a factor compared to Peter's warmed up tires. One thing to remind fans, though, before we get to the 1 hour mark, open up your textbooks to page 34. That's where you can find information for the Majors Garage. The Majors Garage provides its fellow competitors with baseline setups for various events throughout the campaign. There are 3 different tiers: the Baseline Plus, based on driver preferences, and the Elite. Packages of different various prices and totals are available. Go to the Majors Garage. Go to majorsgarage.com to find out more information. And some of the top drivers in this series today are utilizing and have been helping out with that side of things. Valverde, one of his team members, is a part of that group. He's reeled in P4.
Certainly has. So Jacques Show under threat now from Gal Valverde behind. So it's Noah Mission Motorsports versus Kinetic Europe. Once again, the gap at about half a second and closing fast between the 2 Audi R18 LMP1s. Show continuing to try to be on the defensive and trying to get whatever he can. He's got a little bit of slipstream from the LMP2s just up the road, which will help him to maintain that gap, but still, Yal Valverde is definitely on the hunt as he's shrunk the gap now to a quarter of a second within that one little blast.
Seen on board here, and they still have to deal with a lot of the traffic. They've been dealing with some of the LMP2s now for the past little bit. You can see, though, just based on the draft alone, how much the Interville starts to shuffle. Already a 10.5 in one sentence.
Right, things in the LMP1 category getting rather exciting. While Valverde, our points leader in this championship, just closing in, but he has to wait, he has to persist a little bit more because that Ferrari comes right through in the middle. Now, though, I think that's Arnash corner, if I'm not mistaken. Things can get really exciting, and now Valverde just slides around a little bit on the exit there. Not exactly the best way to exit a corner, but still, if you can use that hybrid boost, if you've saved any, it could help him out a lot at this particular stage. Heading towards the Porsche curves now. I think, yeah, this is the Porsche curves coming in. And look at the gap. His poor exit has actually cost him, what, around a second, because Joao Valverde, before this battle, actually, before he made that mistake, was around, what, 0.3 of a second behind Jockey Shoe. And now he's around 1.6 seconds behind. So that dirty air, along with that mistake, causing some major impact on his charge heading into P4. So for Joao Valverde, the challenge just begins right here.
Mind you, Jock Show for No Emission Motorsports, professional drifter in Sweden, able to swift his way through some of these corners and drift his way on the corner exits. Pulled another second after the gap was down to 0.3 in the span of the final sector of the racetrack. By the way, the pace difference, only 1/10 of a second, Nolan, was the difference in the pace between Peter and Andra last time by in the top two for the class.
Oh yes, so only 1/10 of a second for sure. So clearly two drivers that are very evenly matched, and the gap will hopefully continue to close. As there you can see, 12.2 seconds separating them right now, but you can see that Cy Andra was actually closing the gap prior to the round of pit stops, as he had pulled about half a second on it, then of course lost 13 seconds as a result of that pit stop. Gained another 10th since then, but it's been a very interesting fight for sure. But I think right now Cy Andra's got a lot of work to do if he's going to retake that race lead.
Well, they were in drafting pack together, though, Nolan. Remember that, though, as well. They were near bumper to bumper much of the run and trying to go back and forth before the pit lane.
That's very true. That's also a thing we got to keep into factor as well. They were in a drafting pack. Right now, they are most certainly not in a drafting pack, as he's having to go way to the right of the racetrack to avoid an LMP2, which is trying to get around a GTE. Of course, a little hazard of multi-class lapping right there, but it is a very interesting battle. But I think this is showing that realistically, they are really not that far off the pace from each other.
Yeah, they have been dead on pace much of the run. Only a couple times to be able to try and make a move. Speaking of moves, there goes Jans Kaiser trying to get by some lap traffic. Had to really back up the corner and corner apex to make sure he didn't run over Rowan, but Overgaard with that was able to gain a little bit of ground, just not just with the draft, but making sure that he had the better quarter entry, while Rowan had to keep an eye on the back mirror.
Right, here we go. Overgaard just trying to close it. He's chipping away on that gap, and this is exactly what I absolutely adore about GT racing. Two completely different cars, and as I say about that, Overgaard just goes in a bit too hot into the gravel, and guess what? That charge for P1 has all gone for a toss in a matter of seconds. Stefan Overgaard getting a bit too aggressive, and all of a sudden, the next thing you know, he's in the gravel, and that P2 has gone for a complete toss. Oh, goodness me, just missed his braking marker. And that can happen. That can really happen when you're focusing too much on a position and things can just go wrong in your braking.
I think on top of that as well, he was trying to make sure he didn't run over the car in front, while Isaac Snyder was also closing in. In turn, the mistake loses him a ton of time. How much to be precise? In total, about 4 seconds. The term I think that comes into play, Samil, is, and our director will also bring this up in Paul Smith, target fixation. If you focus too much on the car in front, it can mess up where you end up putting your official braking and throttle points.
Exactly, that is exactly what happens. And a lot of times it happens that drivers, when they're battling it out against another person, they generally tend to use their braking points and their braking markers as their own. And it so happens that such a case that, as Paul correctly mentioned, target fixation. You just take a look at so much of their racing lines, and when something happens to them, oh my goodness, well, target fixation once again. Tommy Vandergood just spinning out, going in a bit too hot again, and I think this is just a clear example of Tommy trying to take a bit of vengeance out. He's trying to actually recover from that, and mistakes breed another mistakes if you're not careful enough, and that is exactly what has happened to Tommy. And the road to get back into P1, well, it has just become a bit more harder, that's all I can say.
Lost the back tires, and now that puts him in a battle with Mikael Hagstrom now. 49th overall in the racetrack. It's been a rough skid so far, to say the very least, though, for that car. Hagstrom is on a different lap cycle, yes. But when it comes to Tommy Vandergaard, at one point, remember, was a contender for the win. By the way, interval is starting to shrink a bit now that Andrew's tires are up to heat. Gap is only 10.4 seconds between Peter and Andrew.
This is what we're going to be looking for, of course, with Cyandra on fresh rubber. Molnar Peter definitely double stinted his tires. You almost wonder, because you said, Justin, they have to make one more stop before the end of this race.
Yes.
Will Cyandra try to double stint to potentially leapfrog over him back to the lead? That puts Molnar on the fresh rubber if he's, unless he tries to triple stint it, which, let's face it, that's a huge ask at a track like this.
Wouldn't be surprised that there's the double stint on the line, because remember, they would only need a couple laps of fuel to make it. Here's the challenge there, Samil, is, as mentioned by Nolan, triple stinting is very, very difficult when it comes to endurance racing and has to be done correctly for it to work. They've already had 3 seconds of fall-off to their fastest time. At this point here, Samil, Peter might be now forced to be committed to not take them out, or else he's going to lose the race.
Exactly. But, well, there's a lot of things in life that you can actually do. I mean, you can actually jump off a window, but why would you actually want to do that? In the same way, it's all fun and games trying to say that, oh, you know what, I actually did a triple stint, I'm a fantastic endurance racing driver. But the benefits may not actually be there, so it's a rather tricky situation for Peter. Going to actually roll the dice and going for this call for going for the double stint, it puts him off the charge, it puts him completely on a different scale altogether, but it's all going to cycle back towards the end, and I'm not pretty sure how that's going to happen towards the end. So it should be a rather tricky and fun finish, but trying to take the calculators out and trying to understand what's going to happen should be very tricky. That said, though, all I can see is that Cyandra hasn't really closed up the gap as much as he would expect to. I think the gap is still around 9.7, 9.8 seconds, so it started out at around 11 or 10 seconds. So the gap is closing for sure, but maybe not at the rate that Cyandra would have wanted to, that's for sure.
Bad news if you're a fan of Rene Awara. He said hello to one of the biggest tire barrier hits of the day. He ended up flooring it straight into the tire barriers. He's now done and off the racetrack using his fast repair in the previous incident. So he is now off the racetrack for what has been a nightmarish day for Rene Awara. And you'll see this is what happens, some type of issue. This is going to go into the barrage Mulsanne. And he says, you know what? Day is done.
I'm going to see here as he comes down the hill to the
Right
Mulsanne chicane, and what in the whoa, holy cow, that's technical.
Exactly, if that isn't a hardware failure, I don't know what is.
Like I said, day is done. Straight into the tire barrier. First time seeing someone hit a tire barrier like that. By the way, here's Ross Banfield. He's crawled right up to the back end of Valverde. Every time Valverde's gone right up to the back gearbox of Jacques Show, the dirty air seems to have immediately lost him 2 seconds trying to battle with the race car. And Banfield, he's been able to now reel in said dirty air.
So Banfield on the charge right now. He's just trying to close in from the slipstream. But Nolan, I've got a question for you. How do you actually manage out the hybrid boost in such a case? When you're in a battle, do you actually try to maximize it on the corners, on the straights? How do you actually go in about that? What's your approach in a case like that?
Well, I feel like one of the best things you need to do is make sure that you're using the hybrid boost when you're most optimally would be right after a very hard braking zone leading onto a very long straightaway. That's the best moment to use it because you can get the power down not to the top speed, more to the acceleration, so you can reach your top speed a lot quicker. This is why, like the Kurz boost used in Formula 1 back in the years like 2012 and 2013 before MGUKs and stuff were released, you would see people using that potentially out of hairpin corners because you could get a lot more power down on the throttle when it comes to acceleration, which can in turn help you reach your top speed faster than the car ahead of you.
As you've seen, Thompson is in the pit lane, so window is open for the LMP2s at this point. So drivers are coming down for what could be some of their final stops. Remember, the longest a driver has been able to stretch a stint in the LMP2s is 16-ish laps. Most drivers went 13 to 14. So they are now also, for some of those cars, based on their current fuel projections here, Nolan, to be in a splash and go scenario.
The splash and go scenarios are always a very, very entertaining one for me because it means that you really need to make sure that you get your fuel right and you get it right the first time because you're not going to have a chance to come down and correct it again. You don't want to put too much fuel into the car because that's only going to slow you down both in the pits and on the track because you're going to be heavier. Alternatively, you also don't want to put too little fuel in the car because obviously you're not going to make it to the end of the race, then you're going to have even more problems than what you had beforehand. So it really is a very, very fine line, and it's something that is constantly changing with every minute you drive, as one of our LP2s has had a massive incident. That's Jean-Francois Arsenault for Can-Am Racing that has had an off here at the Porsche Curves.
Let's take a look once again, and you can see had a bit of a closer line on the left side of the track. Right there, that little bit of a bobble just snaps around the car, and the Can-Am Racing machine smacks the front nose.
Well, for Jean-Francois Arsenault, it was turning out to be rather quite an uneventful race, but, well, turns out that things can happen even when you least expect them to. So here's an unnecessary trip to the pit lane for Arsenault. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, it was a regular LMP2 cycle stops as well, so I think it just kind of fits in well for him. But again, you don't really want to lose out a lot of time to the damage as well. So for Arsenault, not a lot of time lost in terms of the pit strategy, but of course, time lost with the damage and the missed pit garage as well. Right. Our focus is back on this battle for the lead. Syandra and Molnar Peter, the gap is surely coming down, but by how much? It's now fallen down to 8.1 seconds. It certainly is coming down, but I guess with around 15 minutes to go, I think if I'm not mistaken, another stop left for these guys. I think it's just getting rather tricky towards here.
At this point now, remember, these are the two quickest cars in the top two. They have been a couple seconds quicker than everyone else in the class today, to be frank. At this point, though, it's going to come down to, for these two teams, whatever call they make, and when they come down to pit here, Nolan, will be the difference between who wins and loses this class today.
It absolutely will, and like we said earlier, Syandra's in a pretty critical position right now. He's got to use that fresh rubber to try to run down Molnar Peter while he can. There's 50 minutes left to go, so there's one more stop that these LMP1s are going to have to make before they're going to be secure on fuel. The question is, when do you come down to make the stop? Peter, like we said, he's got Peter is on the older rubber, so he's at a severe disadvantage right now to Syandra, who is continuing to reel in the gap. In fact, right now, it's down to 7 seconds. So Syandra is still closing in that gap despite being a bit held up here by lap traffic, even in his own class.
Here's the concern, too, based on the math right now, because the gap has been closing interval-wise, we're referencing about a second a lap. Remember, they have to come in at about 5 laps. Do the math. That's a 2-second net gain if this pace continues to maintain. Andrew needs to turn up the wicket just a little bit more, Samil.
Yes, exactly, and those sort of kamikaze laps that could come in the next couple of laps, I think that could completely change the game for the lead. I mean, I'm no mathematician, I just failed most of my math examinations, but if there's one thing that's for sure, if this sort of pace can be maintained, that gap can be tumbling down rather quickly, and that battle for the lead, well, it just becomes ever so exciting in that case. So the Audi, in fact, of Syandra doing a rather good job in P2, just needs to keep it going, and as is the case with most endurance races, you have to keep the consistency bang on target, because there's one thing, he's gone 2 seconds quicker once again, as Paul whispers in my ear. Syandra is just lighting Le Mans on fire, and if he can keep this consistent, as is the case with most endurance races, he will be on his course to win in this race. It's all fun and games calling yourself a qualifying specialist, but when it comes down to the races, consistency and the pace, that's the perfect combination that you need to end up winning races like this one that we're seeing right here.
Keep in mind as well that the battle for P3 is on in said class. We've talked about Jacques Show and his pace. That car has come alive in the second half of this run all of a sudden. He's reeled in Kurt Krum, ran away from João Valverde by 5 seconds. He's one of the quicker cars on the track. He's running the same pace nearly as Andrew right now.
So this is also going to be critical here for Jacques Show as he's trying to secure himself a podium position here. He's gained almost 2 seconds in the past 2 laps alone. 0.7 on lap 26, just over 1 second on lap 27. They're now running lap 28 right now. So Jacques Show still running his way through this race and still trying to find some way to close it in, as now that gap under half a second.
Again, Jacques Show waiting for that chance down the mountain straight to be able to make the move at the moment. Contact the battle for 5th. A few
Oh,
car lengths
dearie me.
behind them, Valverde just got hit in the back end by Ross Fanfield. Both cars appear okay, but they got bumper to bumper right about here where they had hard contact in the braking zone.
Well, don't forget, folks, bump drafting works in NASCAR and ovals. Not exactly here at Le Mans. Banfield just giving him the kiss of love. And while Valverde somehow survives that, these two guys are regulars in our in the European Pro Series. And Valverde in P1 and Banfield in P4. Only a gap of around 121 points, which is not a lot in this series. And that could have been potentially a major, that could have been a potentially drastic accident with major implications on the points. So yeah, thankfully these guys are safe and sound, but this battle is still getting ever so exciting as we witness an earthquake on the track here.
Earthquakes are not good things, let's put it that way. One of the features, mind you, Nolan, that was brought in with the new iRacing update was the ability to have camera shake on some of the TV cameras, in-car cameras, etc. That's some of the shaking you may see here and there throughout the broadcast today. That is an error feature added if you're especially, say, on the oval side with the camera right up next to the safer barrier.
Oh yes, absolutely, and it is something that I'm personally a huge fan of. I definitely like to see that. It definitely helps add to the immersion of things. So once again, you know, continuing to work on making things about as realistic as can be, as right now we take a look back to Ross Banfield, who is still trying to run down Yal Valverde, who's 3/4 of a second up the road in front of him, but that gap also rapidly closing.
Once again, remember, that car had been slowly creeping on in Ross Banfield, the back of the Valverde. And this time trying to take a peek. Gained about a half a car length. Not a good corner exit, though. In fact, it's a better one. Valverde, with a bit of snap of oversteer off the corner, loses the spot.
Valverde has just been having a very, very loose car for a long, long time here today. He's been slipping and sliding around, and finally the implications are concrete. He goes out on the gravel, so somehow controls that car. That is an enormous amount of traction control, manual traction control that he's done as a driver over there. Somehow he's kept it safe. But the consequence of that, the downside of that, is he loses his position to one of his major championship rivals. Guess who it is? It is actually Ross Banfield. So for Valverde, he needs to catch up to make sure that he maintains his points lead intact.
That car slowly sliding on back right into the 322s. Track temperature Fahrenheit-wise is rising in quickly. When this race started, we were in the high 70s. When the double stint strategy was taking place by some of the LMP1s, it was at 80 on the dot. Now it's at 86, and drivers such as Darwin Mites, they're starting to have moments in some parts of the track as the grip levels are decreasing.
Indeed, and that's happening with tire fall off, no doubt, as well, as we look back to see what happened to Darwin Mites. Just entering the Porsche curves, approaching a Ferrari 48 GTE. Oh, there was contact there between the two cars trying to get around, and that sent both cars around the Ferrari, hit the wall, and hard to tell who was at fault there. On the one hand, that Ferrari did slam the door shut on a car that's clearly faster than him in a faster class. On the other hand, though, the door was never really open to begin with for Darwin Mites.
I think it's just one of those unfortunate incidences when you've got the Ferrari who's actually losing traction rather rapidly, and you've got a much faster LMP2 actually coming in and just being there at the wrong place at exactly the wrong time. So again, if I had to classify it, I think it would be a good, clean racing incident. Not clean, frankly, but I think, yeah, I've just been told that, as Nolan correctly mentioned in the chat, he nearly wiped out another LMP2 when coming back on as well. So Nolan, I think that's another thing to look out for as well. So unsafe exits, that's a rather tricky thing that can get you in a lot of hot water.
Again, another one of the Canadian drivers making a one-off attempt, currently racing for Acaro Sim Racing for their respective team. Also races in the IndyCar Championship, which is a sim racing championship on the iRacing service that races on various different platforms. Checking in on the gap again, the lap times are quicker for Andra. The interval, though, has stayed nearly exactly the same despite that pace difference with the traffic management.
Indeed, so it is a bit of an interesting situation here, because you can see Andra gained 2 seconds and then 1.2 seconds, but still struggling to close in the gap, still hovering at about 7.6 seconds. Now, if anything, it's only growing here in the Porsche curves. Molnar Peter is still managing to claw his way out there. I wonder if maybe the performance boost that Cyandra would have gotten on the fresher rubber has gone away at this point.
Yeah, this was the risk that could be a possibility. Yes, the pace is there, but the interval just is not shrinking at this point. It's going to get curious, though, what happens here in about a few laps or so. They still have an estimated 3 laps on the tank until they reach that estimated stop based on the pace they're currently running, which would make them good to make it to go in the fuel. Speaking of fuel, here comes Roland coming in for his scheduled final stop.
So Roland, the leader of the GTE category, coming into the pit lane. Of course, he was having a major battle with some of the Ferraris back there, and of course some major incidents make sure that Roland has a lot of breathing space at the top. Well, you should kind of expect to see the GTEs also coming into cycle now, so they will have their pit stop strategies coming into picture right here. But one thing I'd like to say about the track temperature is that when it rises, a lack of experience of driving at a higher track temperature could really change things for the worse. I remember I was doing a broadcast and a Formula 3 race in Suzuka recently, and at the Degner corners, not a lot of the drivers had a lot of experience of driving with higher track temperatures. So in the race 2, they were completely slipping and sliding all over the place, especially at the fast Degner corners, because they had no idea about how to manage their tires. And the faster temperatures, well, heading into a downhill corner like the Degners, they just didn't have any grip at all. And things like that can happen here at Le Mans as well. When you have the S's or something like that, things can actually pay off really well if you manage the temperatures correctly. But if you don't, well, expect a lot of slips, a lot of slides, and a lot of spins as well, as we see a couple of more GTE cars, especially the Bombshell Motorsport car of Marcus Niskanen, heading into the pit lane for the regular pit stops.
There go some of the Fords this time in. And again, this will be their last scheduled pit stops here. Now it becomes the gamble, though, of do you take tires to try double stint if you're in the GTEs to make it to the end? The time difference in terms of the pit lane delta can gain you lots of time, yes, as we've seen with the LMP1s. Here's the problem, though. As mentioned, it's getting brighter and brighter, meaning the track temp is getting hotter and hotter, and that window for it to working is shrinking, Nolan.
Yes, and this is, again, it's putting teams in a very difficult situation as to what do they want to do when it comes to the tires, because the track is changing every passing second. So you got to wonder, is it worth, the extra risk of staying out on worn tires that I might crash sooner? So we take a look back at what is the battle right now for 6th place in the LMP2 class, riding on board with Gabriel Russo is right behind Christopher Ems. These are kinetic teammates. Russo's going to go to the right side of the racetrack. Ems going to let him through without much of a fight at all. Unsurprising, as they are kinetic racing teammates. So we'll have to maybe help each other stay fuel a little bit here.
Looking like exactly what the game plan is here, as the twinsies pull off and away, and Ruse actually nearly runs away from his fellow twin compatriot in terms of liveries. That's just also behind, mind you, where Nick Rowland also cycled through on the racetrack. Majority of the drivers in his class have, mind you, already come in for their scheduled service. And there's been a bit of a shuffle up in that respective order, mind you, in the GTE too.
Well, if there's one thing that's happened quite a bit today, it's a lot of murders of cones that we've seen on the track, because some of these drivers are just not afraid to try and exploit the track limits. And well, as a result, we've seen some cones being manslaughtered, so to say. But again, that doesn't really matter in the real course of action. For Gabriel Russo, he's converted this potential into a lot of kinetic energy by passing his teammate. But that said, he'll need a lot more of that, because the car ahead, Lucas Euler, in P5 is around, 20-odd seconds ahead of him. So things, well, it could be rather tricky. But again, this LMP2 field has actually spread out a lot over the course of this race, that's for sure.
I'd like to apologize to the poor Marshall that has to move that cone just nudged right now back into position, about 15 seconds or so. But at this point, by the way, as well, as Andrew tries to close up the gap more so, was only a couple 100s, barely even 1,000s quicker. 9 1,000s quicker last time. So at this point, it's looking very more and more like the double stint for Peter worked. Again, the triple stint is going to be where, if the strategy works out, it might be where that's where the real true test is going to be.
Absolutely, but I have a feeling that Molnar and Peter might not be able to go for the triple stint, and here is why. The track is just so hot right now, and it's continuing to heat up as the race goes on, that there is just not a whole lot that triple stint will be able to do for him. It's only going to slow him down more, as now the gap for the first time breaks underneath 7 seconds for just a split moment there. Back up to 7 seconds dead now, but you can see the gap is starting to close again as Syandra gets past lap traffic and gets his pace down.
Yeah, again, this is going to be the true test. But we mentioned a bit of the GTEs and some of the tire strategy there, where a majority of the drivers in that class have pit. Here's a couple things to note. Roland and the 863 Ungaratiano are now the top two because both of them double stinted their tires in the GTE class. Fabrice also double stinted. Overgaard took tires. Van der Gott did not take tires. Many of the competitors behind them ended up doing so. So the top three are all on old tires.
And this could make things rather exciting. So when the top three are on all used tyres, I think towards the end you could see their pace slightly slacking off. And I'll quickly have a look at the live timing to see where the other guys are to try and understand what this could mean in the bigger picture. And from the looks of things, there's a gap of around, 12 seconds. So Tommy van der Good in that Ferrari, who was actually in the leading battle early on, is around 12 seconds behind. So if somehow in this next 36 seconds he can cover up that gap on fresher tyres, well, we could be in for a rather fun finish in the GTE categories. That said, that's a major if. He leads some rather special laps, some rather miraculous laps around Le Mans to try and do that. But if we get something like that towards the end, I will be jumping on the edge of my seat, because there's absolutely nothing better than GTE action, perhaps apart from LMP2 racing as well, that's for sure, because Trudeau and Lucas Euler are now fighting it out for P4 and P5.
Taking a look at that scrap now, separated by just 0.2 of a second. Once again, Trudeau has been up and down inside the top 5 throughout the day. The Canadian's definitely made his name fairly well known, and not just because of the last name on their respective car. Here comes the run, though, to the inside, right side of the racetrack for Euler. Looking like he's got the preferred line, though. We'll have to see. Yes, indeed. Spot give it up, heading to Indy.
So has to give that up, and now this is going to be a good fight here for Alexandre Trudeau to try to get him back. It's going to be very crucial for him for sure, as well, the Canadian Frenchman trying to find some way to reel in Lucas Euler. It's going to be a very tricky one, especially as they're approaching the Porsche curves. He's really got to make sure that he sticks with the back end of Euler, or he is going to lose him by the time they get back around to the Mulsanne straight.
See if that ends up being the case. A bit of a back tire slide, or that time they'll still able to get through more cleanly despite that. Trudeau taking a bit of a different line. Keep note, you can see there that Trudeau just can't get the car to stick as well compared to what we're seeing from Euler off the corner for Satellite.
Yeah, it's getting a bit tricky for Trudeau out here. He's just losing grip lap after lap, and things are getting rather tricky. And, well, one of our regular season drivers, Kurt Krum, comes into the pit lane for regular pit stops in the LMP1 category. He's driving for the Bombshell Motorsports car, and, well, Kurt Krum in all the other races, he's been quite a prominent driver. He's always running in the top, and he's created a lot of entertainment, so to say, in all of our races. Today, unfortunately, though, Krum has been rather silent, and he's not really produced major moments of action, but still, we've got 33 minutes left, and there could be a chance for Krum in that final stint to produce some good racing action around here. He seems to be taking a longer stops of fuel and tyres, if I'm not mistaken, for him.
No, only just fuel. 20-second pit stop there, Samil. Just a splash and go. So the pit window is open to make it to the end of the race. For him, the driver behind Jacques Chaux did have a longer pit stop of 25 seconds of note for the respective stint. Now, again, in this discussion point as well, going to keep in mind that this is now going to mean the alarm bells starting to open up if you're the top two, because they're reaching that 11 lap mark this time by.
Look at this. The gap is under 5 seconds now. So Molnar Peter, he's going to be starting to look a little bit more nervous now, as Scientra's clearly gotten the power down. At this point, Andrew will have Molnar in his sights by the time they reach the end of the very long straightaways. So this is getting tight now for your battle for the overall race lead. It's split up massively. I don't think Molnar Peter's double stint strategy might have pulled off for him. Now the question is, can he go for the triple stint? At this point, if he wants to keep the lead, he doesn't have much of a choice but to go for a triple stint here.
Yeah, remember, lost a ton of time with tires. The timing difference, 22 seconds with the double stint from Peter on the last pit stop window, rather. 37 seconds with tires. Peter is in, Andra coming in this time. Here comes the true test. The gap was reduced to only about 4 seconds. Now we're about to see how they play this here, Samil.
Right, this is when things really get exciting. Will Peter actually go for a triple sim? It is going to be highly unlikely to actually manage it out towards the end of the race. But what else do you do? I mean, if you're trying to get tires and all that, things can actually get out of hand in this pit stop. So things are going to get exciting in this last half an hour of this race for sure. Right, Molnar Peter comes in, stops nice and easy. And take a look at this, guys. Now we'll get a good idea whether he's actually triple stinting or not. Keep a close eye on this one.
See them just behind the scoring pylon and right next to that Jumbotron, right on top of the garages. Well, to see here, 20 seconds, no tires. He is forced to triple stint. He is committed to the call. Will Andra take tires? No, he will double stint. Andra's got the fresher tires now, and the gap is now about 5 seconds.
Oh boy, here we go. I think it's now a heads-up grudge match. Now Andra's got to rely that he's got the better overall pace. He did lose 1.5 seconds throughout that pit stop though, but already he's gained 4/10 back in just the first series of corners here. So Syandra is definitely on the charge right now, and I think he might just barely have enough pace to run down Molnar Peter. He still has 30 minutes left to get it done.
And mind you, again, to remind the folks at home, it wasn't as simple as, I can take tires in the last stop. If he did that, he loses the race. We've seen the difference in the gap on fresh tires and older tires. He had to be committed to that call, essentially, Samil.
Exactly, but considering what's going on, he seems to be losing the race anyway as well. So, bit of a tricky call back at the front. He rolled the dice, but didn't seem to work out for him. Again, that really happens in endurance racing, as we see Niskanen going wide, cutting the chicane. They should just offer Seats a better run, and rightfully so. He just swoops past and understands that Niskanen, he just cut the corner, and naturally Seats should have the upper hand over there. As we see yet another earthquake coming on track. But that aside, I'll actually come back to this battle for the P1 in the LMP1 category. Things like that, you have to take gambles like this one to actually go for a race win. Otherwise, you can't really understand what's going on, and you may not really have the upper hand. So sometimes the risk pays off, sometimes it doesn't. And that seems to be the case for Molnar Peter at this very moment in time. However, Seeds is under pressure once again. He got that position, but he has to defend it really, really hard, as we now see both these cars coming out of the chicane. Justin, just what is going to happen here? Are they going to come to blows for this battle?
Well, if you're Skeet, you're saying please don't. If you're Niskanen, you're also saying please don't. Niskanen having a bit of a run. He's saving fuel though. So here's now the intriguing part too. Remember, fuel is like time, essentially. Both these drivers took tires and fuel. These drivers maybe just try to make sure, I think here, that they have enough fuel for the end, as well as they make smart decisions on where they push Nolan. You don't want to just send it up the middle or send it on the right side of the racetrack and then you end up having a collision in a non-passing zone.
And I think one crucial thing about the fuel, and certainly the time as well, is you do not want to get caught out with an extra lap on the board that you don't have in your tank. That is, of course, something we've seen time and time again. And unlike a lot of road courses, it is a very, very long lap around here. And it's a very fast one, too, that burns a lot of fuel. So if you're caught out being short, that is absolutely disastrous for you. Benjamin Gregory, though, finding his way around Ty Kaveth, as this is a battle now for 8th place in your LMP1 class. So just inside the top 10, Kaveth sends a cone flying into oblivion while Benjamin Gregory takes the position.
And both these cars, mind you, in the rest of that class, all came down to the pit lane this time by. So all drivers in LMP1 contention have pit, except for Ray Partridge, who is currently in his service at the moment, 14th in the class. Want to talk a little bit, though, and mention this about Black Eagle Sim Racing, the car that's currently in P7 with Ty Kevitt's team. We were broadcasting the race yesterday with the Club Sports Series Nolan, and it was a rough one for that organization where they had several trouble spots in a 6-hour endurance race at Watkins Glen.
No, absolutely. A whole ton of trouble spots, and no doubt including that massive pileup that brought out what was the third safety car period of that race. But I'll tell you what, it was certainly an interesting one, and they're definitely looking to have themselves a better go at things here.
Indeed. By the way, Ray Partridge off and away from, he's now finished up that window as here comes more of the traffic, this time zipping its way on through in this specific battle. But once again, under 30 minutes to go, under 27 minutes to be more precise on the clock at the moment. Everyone looking towards the stopwatches once again to see how these gaps all play out. Remember the class leaders up on the top of your screen, Peter, Thompson, and Roland. Thompson's been dominating the LMP2s the entire day. We haven't mentioned him much in the past 30 minutes. That gap has been very large since the drop of the green flag at 7 seconds.
Well, absolutely. That's what happens. Sometimes the best performers are those who just silently work their way through, and in the end people recognize and say, you know what, actually this guy has done a superb job. Right, with that, I think it's time to check out our top 8s for the race, Justin.
Yes, indeed. Let's refresh how things have turned out with all drivers making scheduled pit stops. Peter, remember, is on a triple stint strategy on the tires, trying to make it to the end, leading by 5.1 seconds. Crum, Banfield, Valverde, the top 5. Show, Kaiser, Gregory round up the top 8 of the LMP1s. Then, as just referred to, Thompson is dominating. And the LMP2s, he's been a class of his own, similar drive to what he did at Daytona to start the major series in 2020. He's right now in front of Federer and Mickey in the top 3 in the podium. Those are separated by 28 seconds. Dort was shuffled out to 4th with the pits calls. Trudeau holding on to a top 5. Back to P6 is Dawson Block, a minute and 15 seconds behind Thompson and a good 20-plus seconds behind the top 5. David H. Baker, Marcus Rumner round out the top 8 in that class. Then the GTEs, that's where the intriguing parts come in. It's a massive gap for Roland now with the double stint on the tire, 17 seconds. Garagino is only holding on to 2nd, and the drivers behind him, it may be a stolen 2nd podium position for that 2nd place car. Overgaard took tires. He is 20 seconds behind P2. Vandergaard is on a double stint in 4th, while Drolet is in P5. Wegert, Fabrice, and Skeets round out your top 8. That's a rundown of your top 8 positions on the board in the final minutes of this race, under 25 minutes to go on the clock.
Approaching that 2-hour mark now from when the green flag dropped to, of course, now, and battles still have yet to be decided. One thing I would like to note is that, remember how we were going to be watching Molnar, Peter, and Syandra in that 5-second gap. It has really held stationary just about throughout that entire run. I mean, for the most part, it has been hovering about 5 to 5.2 seconds. It's down to 4.8 as of just a little while ago, as Syandra did get a better drive off of one of these corners, but it's already increasing back out to 5 seconds again. I'm not sure if Syandra has got the time or the pace he needs anymore to run him down.
I still think there's still a shot, though, because Andra has been able to manage the traffic better, as in he's been able to get by them quicker. Peter's been held up by a few drivers. A few drivers, you can see, have lost their nose cones and are taking service. Those are the LMP2s that are coming in for their final fuel stops. And those include some of the kinetic cars, as well as some of the bombshell cars. This is why Gabriel Ruse is in the pit lane. He ended up coming in for his service in the 323.
Well, for Gabriel Ruse, he was having a good race until this very moment. I think initially at the start he had a bit of trouble early on, but I think he just passed his teammate for P6 and now he's retired out of this race as well. So another good race coming to an end just because of a crash. So again, although it may be only a 2.4-hour race, you still have to get to the end, as we see one of the GTE cars facing the wrong way round. That's not how you win a race, folks. That is how you end it. That's the BMW M8 GTE at the exit of a chicane. And I've got my bet on this one. Went in a bit too hot and turned round. Let's have a look at this one. A bit too feisty again, missing the marker. Oh no, that's actually on the exit. So got a bit too much of the curb, bit too much of the throttle, and there's absolutely no grip at all. It's as good as pretty much like a slippery surface. When you put oil on the track, that is exactly what happens on the curbs. Your car has no grip at all, and my God has to experience that the tough way around.
Again, Gaunt was the man who went around. By the way, sometimes people can hear what's said in broadcast booths. If you're Syandra's team, They may have been hurrying, hearing the calls to push because he pushed a full second in the span of half a lap. Welcome to Le Mans, folks, where the intervals can change that quickly.
3.4 seconds now, so clearly somebody is listening in and clearly doing a bit of multitasking while driving, it might seem. So Andrew still running them down, and this is reigniting my thoughts as he might have a chance, but he is going to have to push all out right through to the end of this race. It really is down between these two drivers, Justin, because you got 3.3 seconds separating first and second place. How much is separating second and third place? Over a minute.
That is a massive, massive gap, mind you, on the racetrack. And mind you, the overall race leader is stuck in severe traffic just up the road. Andrea's having clean space. Not as much if you're Peter, now stuck behind Arsenault in one of the LMP2s in Can-Am Racing's machine. Remember, Can-Am top 7 in the team standings entered today for the elite side of things. And this is going to cost him even more time. And our second loss behind the traffic and the curves.
And just as if we thought that the triple stint wasn't going to help out, this traffic certainly makes things far worse. So I think all of this just cements the fact. I think it's a bit anticlimactic, but still, I think we're getting a good idea that Peter may not exactly hold on to this lead towards the end of the race, though.
That is the worst spot, mind you, in the entire track, through the Porsche curves, through Corvette, all the way up towards Rochefort, to be stuck behind anybody. And the worst class, too, since they are marginally close speeds, Nolan.
Indeed, the LMP2s are much closer in speeds to the LMP1s, especially, key point here, in the corners than the GTEs. And he caught them right when you cannot go side by side to get around another LMP2. So he has lost a massive amount of time, 2.8 seconds. Whereas Cyandra going to catch lap traffic when they're on the Mulsanne straight. So it's all gone into the hands of Cyandra. You can see he's already ducked his way around that other lap car, and now he's got Molnar Peter in his sights and is looking to run him down.
You can see him just up the road. This is still under 3 seconds the gap. And another LMP2 to try and get around. That driver in front is Darwin Mites, 24th overall. That is currently the back end of the top 10 of the class, letting him go on the corner exit. But once again, a couple tenths lost because he had to check up to make sure he didn't run over the back wing. And he's still got some clean space now until he reaches the GTE leader that is on his own, mind you. That is, again, the satellite racing car you see.
Well, the GTE leader, the satellite racing car of Nick Rowland, has just had pretty much a perfect race so far. He's been involved in some battles. Yes, he's been involved in a sort of slightly hairy incidents, but somehow he's managed to keep it all clean, and he's just having a tremendous race at the front. Now, though, in the frame are the leaders of the LMP1 category, Molnar Peter and Cyandra, and Cyandra is just getting ever closer. The gap on the live timing, well, it just shows it to be getting ever so closer. It's only 2.283 seconds. And remember, when these guys actually came into pit for their final pit stops, that was down to around 5 seconds. And that traffic certainly isn't helping Peter as well. So Cyandra getting ever closer. But again, I'm just going to put out another Murray Walker cliche from my bag. It's one thing to close up. It's a completely different thing to pass. And unless I think what Cyandra is able to recover his hybrid boost pretty well and something or the other happens, it's going to be a bit tricky because, of course, the gap is closing down, but not at a very quick rate for Molnar Peter. He's doing a good job defending it, as Thomas Anderson has an incident, Justin.
Currently scored in 10th in the GTE class. This is what happened, and bye-bye back end for the Forza Esports machine. Anderson might just drawn on the oval side for Forza Esports.
So Forza Esports having some slight more misfortunes there as Anderson going to get himself back rolling again, and I'm still watching that gap between your LMP1 leaders because it's 2.1 seconds now. But now, looking back to the 2.4s, now this is a battle that has been going kind of back and forth throughout the course of this race, and they really are in a battle of their own here. Nicholas Skeets still trying to find his way around Marcus Niskanen. This is the battle for 8th place in your GTE field. The gap, under 0.2 of a second. Will Niskanen have a look? He is not going to. Remember, Niskanen lost the lead after he jumped the chicane after carrying too much speed. The first of these chicanes on the Mulsanne Straight, has not been able to retake the lead since. Now, he's right on the back end and trying to run him down. Meanwhile, though, back up to Syandra, he has lost a significant amount of time, 3.2 seconds. That's down to 3.4 now for the gap. I wonder if something might have happened to Syandra in the final curves. Maybe a bit of a tank slap, which could have caused him to lose some time.
It was an open space for a bit, but did lose some time in the chicane. Remember, he also got stuck in a bit of the traffic that Peter had to deal with. That's why the last time was 7/10 quicker for Peter. Here's the thing, last time they had clearer space on the straight. This time, they're expected to reach a fair decent amount of congested traffic up the road. You see some of it now that's being dealt with for the overall race leader.
Right, so in hindsight, it seems that the triple stint wasn't a very bad option, at all. I'm sorry, because my dear, I'll speak about that later. Because John Lang, who's been largely quiet for this race, has had some sort of an incident. Yeah, that's at the chicane. No, that's at the Mulsanne corner, going well. And that's a strange one.
Well, the team's called Missed Apex Racing Team, and as you can tell, Lane missed the apex. Get shuffled down to 12.
Really, they're living up to the team name, aren't they? They're dedicated to it, I assume.
Right. Let's actually come back to speaking about the leaders at the front, because that triple stint, I think it seemed a bit outlandish at first, because of course when we thought of a triple stint would just completely kill off the tires, and the time lost over there would be quite a bit. But again, Molnar Peter is still in the race. Had he not triple stinted, he would have been far behind, and he wouldn't have been able to actually close up the gap. So still, with only around 15 odd minutes to go, there is still a chance that if Molnar Peter defends for all his life, he can actually be the winner. So the strategy element, the door is not closed, the book is not over yet. We still have perhaps enough time for a final twist of this tail.
Still approaching 15 minutes to go, estimated 5 laps to go this time by. By the way, Gregory has had to make an unscheduled pit stop, it appears here. Again, ducked down to the lane after he had some contact in his left front. That's the 69 for the LMP1s, who has to sacrifice the top 10.
It's unfortunate there for Benjamin Gregory. That was the one thing he was not hoping to have happen today, and unfortunately will have to give up that top 10 position to Travis Henderson. A driver that has kind of had his own little up and down day, as now we can see Syandra working his way through the final LMP2. And you mentioned, Justin, how he was approaching the lap traffic. Both these guys were approaching lap traffic at the on the Mulsanne Straight. In my opinion, I think both these guys would say better there than where they are right now.
Here's the thing to think about here. For both of you guys, want to get some of this approach to this first is, when it comes to the tires, on iRacing, it's almost like an onion. You peel off one layer, you get a level of drop-off. You peel off another one, you get the next level. Peter's potentially approaching that next layer of drop-off we're talking about here. He's been able to hold on to the 322s, but eventually those tires are going to have that next peeling moment to the next drop-off level.
And just to add to that onion analogy, if you don't do it correctly, and if you do it just a bit too slowly in the wrong way, you could end up with tears in your eyes. So that is one thing to watch out for as well. Managing the tires, I think, is such a crucial aspect, as Justin mentioned correctly. You just have that period of drop-off, and as a driver, you need to be so adaptable, so flexible to try and manage your driving style in that very regard. Because, of course, there are so many drivers around the world who can say that they're the best, they're the fastest in the ideal conditions. But that's the thing with endurance racing. The conditions are never ideal. They just keep on changing. And when these trials drop off, that is when your real skill, that is when your actual ability as an endurance racing driver comes to the test. And now Jock Shue tries to make a move on the championship leader, Wow Valverde, swerves to the inside, chooses his line. They make a little bit of contact, but not enough, as Wow Valverde goes for the cutback. They're going side by side here. With a lot of intent, Jock Shue just makes up his move and just clears his mind and says, right, that P5 is all mine, and now, wow, I'm not giving you any room at all.
Mind you, that No Emission Motorsports machine added about 5 seconds more of fuel during the pit stop window, hence why they got cycled out from where they were around the top 3. Still, though, a chance to get as high as 4th, depending on how the pace falls in these next 13 minutes and 5 estimated laps for them.
Yes, absolutely so. Still a lot of racing left to go. It's good. 13 minutes remaining as this gap now from Jacques Show up to Ross Banfield, 7.5 seconds, and definitely not closing it anytime soon. I think right now Show has got to worry a lot more about Valverde behind, as they are now approaching one of the kinetic racing Ferraris, and this is going to hold both of them up here, but this will help Joao Valverde as he closes in the gap once again to Jacques Show. Eric Mickey from LMP2s is down to the pit lane.
So a few drivers making unscheduled stops. They will have to also maneuver a stock LMP2 that is right in the middle of the straightaway, just getting rolling. The 50 of Arsenault was stopped in the middle of the track, trying to get back going after he spun and slapped the bit of the Armco. Had also missed the first chicane that got him into this situation in battle.
Well, Jean-François Arsenault, well, he was having quite a good race, but again, 2 incidents in a matter of an hour, and for Arsenault, things have all gone wrong. He actually does quite a good job of swerving past the chicane, but again, that never helps, and then all of a sudden, just when he thought that things were going right, Jean-François Arsenault says, how can that happen? And just too much throttle, and he spins around and hits the barricades. For Arsenault, I think it's just getting ever so tricky with only 11 minutes to go.
Yep.
I doubt that there's a good result to salvage out from here, but I'll keep that aside for later on, because Justin, Joao Valverde is one man who loves a fight back, and guess what? That is exactly what he's doing right here.
That incident, mind you, also had dirt kicked up in that scenario, just passing by the LMP2 race leader. Here comes the run from behind. Jacques Show cutting to the left side of the track. Side by side, heading up to Virage de Mosnoy. Trying to take it the long way, and GTE up the road as well. Valverde makes the move, a bit of a touch. Still up inside the top 5 for Valverde.
It's not over. Valverde is going to have to really fight right now if he plans to hold on to that one, because Jacques Show closing on the back end of this race car, and that Audi R18 is looking to go right now, and he's looking to secure himself a top 5 position. This is the battle to see who can get themselves the final top 5 position here. Deep on the brakes. It's a bounce from Jacques Show, nearly running them over in front, but manages to keep it out of him. Should note as well, Cyandra has closed the gap down to Molnar Peter, 1.6 seconds.
That is within drafting range up the road, as Kaiser in 7th position also has a bit of damage, you see, on the left rear. This is why. Tank slapper into the wall with the right side, spins it around.
This is the best part of any endurance race, when everything culminates down to the end, when all the strategies come here at one place, and this is when things get just so exciting as a fan. You've been plotting all the strategies, you've been plotting all the pit stops, and now you see the final result culminating right here. And now the battle for the lead is just getting ever so tricky. Valverde now getting past in this battle for P5, if I'm not mistaken. But let's focus at the top, because Molnar Peter and Cyandra, the gap, if the live timing is not mistaken, is around 3 seconds. 10 minutes to go, and the gap is still 3 seconds. We kind of expected Cyandra to just...
It's 2 seconds.
2 seconds, yeah. So the live time is just being a bit glitchy there on my PC, but it's still... We kind of expected Cyandra to close up massively, but somehow that hasn't really happened, and with 9 minutes to go, Molnar Peter with a triple stint could actually win this race. How fantastic is that?
Kaiser has had to come down to the pit lane. There was also the position change you've seen with Show getting by Valverde after the run down Donarge, going all the way towards the Porsche curbs. 2.5 seconds is now the gap. It went down to 1.8 seconds, as no one mentioned there. The LMP2 leader, mind you, has lost the lead, having to come down for a 3rd pit stop. Nolan.
He has, and this is detrimental for Riley Thompson, who's right now stopped in the lane, has given up the lead to Alexis Federo. We thought Thompson had this secured, and he's found himself now down in 2nd place as a result of this.
And based on the numbers we're seeing and hearing now with this will mean another additional pit stop for the LMP2s here. Mind you, they haven't been drafting with each other like they were in the first half of the race.
And that could mean another pit stop. And Federo, of course, will have to go for another pit stop. So ideally, we may still have Thompson coming out to lead this race. There's just drama at every single corner of this racetrack. And that is the exact reason why I love endurance racing. If you still thought that this was boring, if you still thought that endurance racing is a bit too long and multi-class racing is only for the oldies and the traditionalists, take a look at this one. I am sure that you'll never, ever leave any other endurance race ever again. I am absolutely loving this one.
That whole entire running order is going to be flipped upside down potentially, because there are some drivers who have had to come down, yes, but others who might be able to make it without that pit stop who are 6 laps into his stint. Checking back in now in Valverde, he's 6 laps into his respective stint, mind you, in the LMP1s. And again, looking to get the run on Show. Show, though, getting a bigger burst of speed this time, heading off towards Indianapolis.
Thundering down this very long straight up to Indianapolis. There goes Valverde. Makes the look back to the inside, and that's another pass complete on Jacques Show. So once again, another overtake complete. Show trying to fight back. Don't make contact, please, and thank you. And Show trying the outside. Now trying to go for a cutback down for Indianapolis. This is getting all too close for comfort now. Now trying to duke it out as they fly through Arnage, and Valverde gets that one secure, but here comes Jacques Show once again up the right side of the car, side by side, drag race for the Porsche curves. Valverde forced to back out, and now looking to cut back again.
Drivers looking to show their Canadian manners. Just so happens to be the fact they're racing a Can-Am Racing LMP2 up the road. Arsenault nearly bobbled his car. Show trying to say his please and thank yous. Says no is the back end of the 50. Arsenault getting loose in front of them. He spins off the track. And that traffic just managed its own self. The battle's still on for P5.
Action everywhere, even when the lap traffic. Valverde makes his move. He just tries to go over there, but now it gets blocked off once again. And now, like a predator, he's stalking his prey, and he just needs to make that one firm move, that one good move down the inside, or perhaps, if he's bold enough, even around the outside, that can get him that crucial top 5 finish. Valverde is on the prowl. He's stalking him right now. Gets so close at the Dunlop chicane, but not close enough. Now, though, the only reasonable option seems to be at the chicanes. He needs to get a fantastic run off Test Rouge and these S's here as well. He's closing up ever so much, and look at that, getting on the tail. Some proper nose-to-tail, gearbox-to-nose racing going on over here. And Valverde is just absolutely loving this one. A good exit past Test Rouge, and now deploy the hybrid system. Deploy it as much as you can and get into the slipstream, because this one can be a pivotal move for Valverde.
Again, looking to try and secure a top 5 really far back. This is similar to what happened on the long run during the last pit stop stints for these LMP1s, for these particular 2. Show has been really good in the corners. Valverde's been really good down the straightaways with the help of some of the drafting part. This time, not a good corner exit. Again, loses a bit more time, but still within slipstream range with traffic ahead. Hegman now moves to the right side of the track.
This is going to get very, very tight here. Show moves to the left to get around the bend. Valverde does the same. Both drivers using the Ferrari as a bit of a drafting pick to get whatever kind of slipstream they can. Now, can Valverde close the gap? He's got 5 minutes to get it done, so this is going to be very critical now for Valverde if he's trying to go for that spot. Half a second separates them. That gap, though, can close in oh so much in these little straightaways. It's less than 4/10 all of a sudden. Closing down. Now it's less than 3/10. Under quarter of a second. Will Valverde make the look down into the Mulsanne corner? He's not going to. Not getting that brave just yet. He's definitely going to make it, though, on the run down to Indianapolis.
That's been the best passing zone for this battle so far. That's where they've gone back and forth a couple times. The past couple laps, more traffic breaks up a bit of the slipstream, though. May take that away. Up the road, though. 2 estimated laps to go this time by for the LMP1s, and the gap is down to under 2 seconds ago for Andrew with no traffic between for now.
And Andrew knows about that. He knows that time is running out, and his race not only is against Peter, but is also against the clock. He needs to get that done, and he needs to get that done rather quickly. Andrew just needs to put in the laps of his life. 1.4 seconds. The gap is closing up ever so much. He uses the GTE car. 1.4 seconds now. Just look at that time stumbling down. 1.2. Andrew is closing up with only 3.5 minutes to go. We could be in for one of the more frantic finishes that you will ever see in an endurance race. Here he comes, closing in so much. This chicane may not be possible, but perhaps something like the Mulsanne corner, and Andrew may be pouncing. He sees him, he's stalking his prey, but now he just has to go in and make that final ferocious move. 1 second the gap now. Look at it fall down. This is the one thing that we've all been waiting for. We were all wondering, how was Andrew not able to close the gap? Well, guess what? He's doing that exactly right now. And now Peter swerves around to try and avoid the drop, but Andrew still gets it anyway.
Now within drafting range. Mind you, they will get the white flag this time, under 3 minutes on the clock. Takes 3 minutes and 22 seconds for them to get around the racetrack. Many drivers making their way down the Mulsanne straight, but much of it is clear. The focus is between these two. Under a second now, Andra looking to close up. It might come down to the final lap, Nolan.
This is going to be very critical. Syandra's got to put in the lap of his life right now if he wants to go and win the Le Mans 2.4 hours in the Major Series European region through the Mulsanne hairpin, and it is a great drive off the corner. Less than 9/10 of a second, down to 7/10, under 3/4 of a second. He is closing, he's closing fast. It's a heads-up grudge match now, while meanwhile, Alexis Fedorov is ducked to the pit lane for the LMP2 leader. He's going to give that up, no doubt.
So that is going to change now. That will likely secure Thompson the class win for that, depending on how things cycle through and how much fuel is put in the 199. The teammate to Andra. They look to try and take home the LMP1 victory, though. More traffic making its way towards the Porsche curb to the right side of the track. Minute 37 to go on the clock as Andra waits for the right moment.
He's coming, it's gonna be a bit tricky to the Porsche curves. He may lose some time to the dirty air, but you kind of get a feeling that there's only 3 or 4 more opportunities left for Andra, and that may just be enough. He's just gaining the pace lap after lap, and now that doesn't seem to be quite a bad exit to the Porsche curve. So Andra, if anything, has just closed up the gap over here, closing in. Can he get something done to the upcoming chicanes? It seems highly unlikely, but the gap will be falling down. There's an LMP1 battle for second as well, and look at that. The car up ahead just brake tested the LMP1 car, the leader, and Peter just closed the gap down over there. He's just backed into Syandra now pretty much, and now Syandra uses the boost, and so does Peter, and Peter just gets a little bit of breathing space. Here we come, folks. White flag in the air. The final lap has begun, and this is a proper grudge match for the lead.
Mind you, the 199 of Fedorov did come out with the race lead after 4 seconds less of fuel in the OMP2s. So, 2 different battles taking place in the final moments of this race. Andra in perfect striking distance to make the move, get ready on the edge of the seats. Back to the Mulsanne straight they go this time.
Ladies and gentlemen, hold on to your hats. You didn't think you'd see drag racing here in the Le Mans circuit, did you? But now, that's exactly what you're going to see. Syandra loses quite a bit of time in the entry of the Mulsanne straight. It's down to 6/10 of a second now. He's going to have to really work hard here to close in that gap. It was over a second the last time he was by here, though, at the line. He's got the pace he needs to reel him in. He's got to make sure that he can really nail the marks. Oh, no! Peter's run wide to the chicane! That's a terrible exit! This is going to be crucial here for Syandra. He's going to make the move.
How much boost will they have is the question as well. Will they save enough for the right moment? Andra, dead even on pace, now gains some speed, heading towards the second chicane. Peter defensive line, blinking lights, traffic moves out of the way. Peter on the left side. Andra able to get the better arc into the corner. Better corner exit.
The touch!
Bit of a checkup.
Oh my goodness! Syandra and Peter on the final lap of this 2.4-hour race. They just make contact with each other. Somehow, some way, I do not understand how, but they're still on the track. Now, Andra, though, goes to the outside. This is his opportunity. They're going side by side, heading into Mulsanne corner. Who's got the edge? Andra with the nose up ahead. Oh my goodness! Goes to the outside. Does he run wide? No, he doesn't. It's a flat drag race heading off Mulsanne corner. And I'm almost losing my voice, but so be it. Here he comes around the outside, Syandra, and makes the move for the lead. Wow.
Able to make the move. Peter back to second. Will he strike back? Did he save enough boost? Traffic in the way. To the left side. That's Overgaard moving out of the way. Andra holds on by 2 car lengths, coming towards the final sector of the racetrack. Of note, the LMP2 lead has cycled back to Thompson as they get ready for their white flag lap. Thompson right now leads by 3 car lengths in the LMP2 class. They're taking the white flag this time. The teammate, the man in second place in that class, looks to take home the victory in the LMP1s. Andra, final sets of corners. For Syandra, led much of the way, fell behind after the triple stint strategy call from Peter. Now, through the final sets of chicanes, the fresher tires prevail. Final corners, heading towards the 4 chicanes and the final edge of the track. For Andra, the 8-11. Through the final corner, he wins the Le Mans 2.4 LMP1 class in stellar fashion.
What an absolute drive there for Andra. Hit every single mark and made the pass in the last half of the last lap. What a drive for him. And now, of course, you do still have 2 classes that need to be decided, your LMP2 and your GTE classes. Riley Thompson currently has the lead, took it away from Alexis Fedorov on the just 1 lap prior. The gap right about 0.8 of a second. Not quite sure if Fedorov is going to have the pace to run him down.
Remember, Thompson made the pass last time. Major run to the corner for Fedorov. Lost a bit of speed coming out of the first chicane, though. Still is within drafting range. This is coming down to the wire. Strategy put that machine to the 199 in contention for this fight. Mind you, Mickey, Trudeau, and Ur all already crossed the stripe, so their races in 3rd, 4th, and 5th are already secure. This is for the lead and the title of the OMP2 class.
All or nothing here for Fedorov at the next corner. It is the Mulsanne corner where we crucially saw the move being made here for the LMP1 category. Fedorov closes up, tries to get in on the draft. 6/10 the gap now. It looks ever more unlikely, but if there's any place where you can get something done, it has to be Mulsanne. Here he comes. It seems highly unlikely, and it seems a bit anticlimactic, but that said, Fedorov has closed up, but just not close enough. That said, we still have only a couple of opportunities left. If Fedorov can get something done miraculously, he should be winning this category, but I think that's going to be a fantastic finish. Only half a lap left, Justin.
That time a very deep braking zone for Fedorov, just getting through the gears now. 7/10 the gap. Gonna need a bit of luck here. They have clean space for this fight. Once again to Indianapolis this time. Once again, hard on the brakes. Fedorov rolls it into the curbs, closes the gap in half. Interclass traffic in the way. That's Tom Drelling they may have to deal with in the final chicanes.
This is getting crucial now. Thompson gonna be driving for his life right now. Still have that 1 lap car ahead of them. We've seen that this is the worst place to catch lap traffic. This could be a huge deciding factor in this battle for LMP2.
We'll see how this is played. Fedorov bobbled. Goes through the gears. Down to half a second. Again, bobbles the back tires. Just avoids the safer barrier. Really pushing hard in the corners. Still lap traffic up the road. Thompson looking to make the move. Trying to get in the clean space. Fedorov looking for one last send. Back into the barrage Ford they go. Traffic up in front. Thompson forced to check up. Fedorov tries to go in. Final corners. Fedorov for the run. Thompson to the left side. Fedorov not able to get side by side. Riley Thompson holds on to take away the checker flag.
Oh my goodness.
I've only got one sentence to say. Are you not entertained? How can you not be? After 2.4 hours and we still get this kind of a finish. That is absolutely insane. But let's keep that aside for later on. The finish of the GTE categories here as well. Nick Rowland winning after a dominant race in the GTE. He comes on to wrap up this entire race. And boy, there's just been so much action, so much drama that I'm just lost for words at this stage. That was incredible.
Drivers still circulating their way around the racetrack, but overall, you have to think about this. Some of the craziest finishes of the season. On the road course side, again on RaceSpot TV, the iRacing Esports Network, let alone in the Major Series. But as well, a stellar team performance, Satellite Racing. 2 with the 3 classes go their way today. Let's take a look at how they finished off. Andra, the New England-based driver, comes away with a victory in a throw-in last lap pass, making the move on Peter, winning by 1.1 seconds. Kirk Crum in third position, a minute and 16 seconds behind. Banfield and Show round out the top 5. Valverde finished in 6th, Ty Keveth in 7th. Kaiser, Henderson, Hermilla, and Lane rounded out the top 11 finishing positions. Gregory and Sharp also finished on the lead lap. Everyone else a lap down or more. Partridge, first driver lap down. DNFs for Cologne, David E. Baker, Joshua Wolf, Thomas Peterson in this Mad Lad race. Speaking of Mad Lap finishes, one of the drivers that looked to try to make it a full sweep in the GP2s, in the Proto 2 class rather, Thompson able to break that potential sweep. Fedorov tried to do it for Satellite Racing, could not do it. Mickey came home in third, a full lap down, while Trudeau, Uller, Ems, Brock, David H. Baker, Marcus Rumner, and Puteklis rounded out the top 10 quiet run for the 666. Mites came home in P11 with Bacci Ponte in 12th. Tom Drelling, the last driver on the lead lap, just right in front of the battle for the win. Arsenault, the first driver, 2 laps down, mind you, as well in that class. Scurry, Snyder, Ruse, Bobrovsky. Round out the drivers of note. Bobrovsky was that demolished front nose driver we've seen for Grizzly TFR Pro. Nick Rowland, compared to the other classes, had a nice and calm finish. In fact, able to lap his fellow competitors at the stripe. Overgaard, Vandergott, and Drolet round out the top 4. Weigert in 5th. Fabrice, Niskanen, Skeets, Anderson, Hagman rounded out your top 10. Rounding out the drivers who entered today's round in the GTE class, Belval, Martzov, Goodrechino, along with Hagstrom, Gaunt, Nilsson, Aurora, and a rough point day for Dallas Pataska. A DNF, 28 laps down for the car number 23, was one of the top contenders for the championship entering today. But that will take a quick break. Post-race coverage coming up after this. You're watching the iRacing Esports Network and RaceSpot TV for the Major Series European Region Pro Split. You talk about crazy finishes. How about one today? 2 different classes came down to last lap moves to decide the victors today. Justin Prince, Nolan Rempel, Samil Aurora with you, Paul Smith in the director's seat for today's action here for Le Mans friends for the Major Series European region, Le Mans 2.4. After 2 hours and 24 minutes of racing, it is 2 class victories for Satellite Racing and a big victory as well for Riley Thompson in the LMP2s. It was a crazy one, to say the very least. And first things first, Cy Andra has to be saying a sigh of relief, to say the least. Fresh tires taken on one of the first pit stop windows, double stinted tires compared to the triple stinted for Peter, making the move on the final lap in a drag race, especially coming off the Mulsanne corner. How are you feeling coming away with the victory today?
Like you said, I'm relieved. The stress on those last 2 stints, I was second guessing myself so much. It's like, should I have taken tires? Should I not have taken tires? And just watching Peter keep the gap, by the end of the 3rd stint, I wasn't sure if I could catch him, but I think he hit the cliff around halfway through the 4th stint, and that's how I was able to catch him and pass him on the last lap. I didn't help myself by getting all those slowdowns, by the way. I think it would have been a little bit less exciting and better for my heart, but yeah, like you said, sigh of relief.
Talk us through that last lap when you finally got within drafting distance of Peter and had a back and forth heading towards Sector 2 of the racetrack.
I think in my mind, I knew it would come down to who had more boost coming down that last straight. It was either going into the Porsche curves or out of Mulsanne corner. I just knew it. So I was just building up the boost that entire lap in the draft, braking early, making sure I make the corner, not wasting boost on exit, staying in the draft. And then I think that extra 10% boost I had coming out of Mulsanne corner made the difference.
We were talking about that and the importance of saving the boost. It definitely got the answer right there of it coming into play towards the checker flag, absolutely. But Cy, of course, coming into today from your race in the Sports Car Open and many other series, overall, what drew your attention to run in today's race here for the Major Series, and what was a competitive race between you and Peter, 2 fellow SCO competitors?
Honestly, they beat us in the SCO 6-hour. And I think we needed a little bit of payback, but it was all good fun, both events. And we'll probably meet each other again going into the 24-hour.
We'll see what happens indeed for 24 hours in the French countryside. But with that, is there anyone you want to thank for being a part of a big victory for Satellite Racing?
As always, Nick, Alexi, and Lucas for coming together and doing this as a team. We've done a lot of testing, made sure everybody's comfortable with their setup and all that stuff, make sure everybody's got their paints and all that to look good on the broadcast. And thanks to Eric for helping us with the setup as well.
Congratulations on the overall N-Class victory today in a wild finish.
Thank you.
That was Cy Andra. His team came away with the victory overall class-wise in the LMP1s. Standing by with your overall LMP2 class winner, who also had to deal with a lot of pressure in the final laps. Nolan Rempel is with Riley Thompson.
Thank you, Justin. Now, Riley, shall we say that it was a bit of a stressful final sector of the racetrack for you, with the lap traffic and all? You did manage to still come away with the LMP2 class win after a dominant day, but only just.
Yeah, that whole time, I kind of realized how far Alexis was going on fuel, and I was debating on taking the extra lap of fuel because I wasn't sure how LMP1s would be. So I ended up taking that. I think that cost me about 3 seconds, but overall, he definitely played this strategy really well on me.
Well, apart from that final lap where it did get very, very tight, you did have a very, very good day for yourself. Of course, Alexis Federal did take the lead away from you, and you managed to pass him back with 2 to go. Walk us through that second to last lap. What was it like when you were trying to run him down and just trying to get yourself secured back in that lead and then hold on for the win?
Just kind of trying to stay calm. It's been a while since I've actually been in this position before, so I was just trying to take my time. I knew I had the lap after, and just trying to see what I could have done.
Well, you clearly did everything right because you did come away with that class win today. How are you feeling going into the later portions of the season? Because, of course, it has been a pretty decent run for you so far this season, and of course, coming up next is going to be the IndyCar race at Road America. How are you feeling going into that one?
Feeling pretty good. I've been driving at Indy for a while now, but I think Road America has been one of my weaker tracks there, so hopefully I can change that, and yeah.
Practice does make perfect after all. And before we let you go, who helps you in that car to be fast today?
I'd like to thank Craig Setup Shop, Linford, and Baylor Host for sponsoring our Simsa machine, Total Downforce Racing for letting me continue to run with them under this series, and Majors and you guys for putting all this together.
And thank you, Mr. Thompson, for giving us a very good show today, and congratulations on getting yourself a win here in LMP2 today.
Thank you, guys.
And with that, gonna turn things back to Justin Prince as we continue to move on down through the order.
Indeed. It was, compared to the other finishes, it was a calmer day for Nick Rowland. He's standing by with Samil Roller after coming away with the GTE victory and completing 2 of 3 victories for Satellite Racing in their classes today.
Well, Nick, that got rather quiet for you towards the end. Firstly, congratulations on a great drive. How are you feeling after this race?
A bit sweaty, but it was good.
That's for sure.
Yeah, it was a good race. I really made an on-the-fly decision in the second pit stop to not change tyres. I had originally came into pit lane going to change them, and I saw what my wear was, and I thought, all right, I'm going to risk this. I'd not been confident with my pace throughout testing, so even with the new tyres with the guys behind me who I presumed were going to change, then I didn't feel great in the fact I was going to hold them behind. So I thought, no, I won't take the risk. Well, actually, I took the risk and didn't change tyres, and it paid off.
Well, it paid off indeed towards the end, winning by a major margin. Well, I think you had a big battle going on there with one of the Ferraris as well, if I'm not mistaken. That was Tommy van der Good. Can you tell us a bit more? Can you give us a bit more of an idea about what really happened there and how you were able to survive through that one?
I think it was Stefan actually that I had the battle with.
I guess Stefan. Yes, indeed. Sorry.
Yeah. I'm not actually sure what happened to the leader. I kind of came across it right towards the end of it happening. I came out the second chicane and I saw there was a kind of a GT off to the left, a P1 off to the right, so I knew something had happened. But then the battle with Stefan was just initially I called up to him and I started to fuel save a little bit, and then I made a mistake into Mulsanne corner, so I was having to work harder and basically I undone what I'd already made up in fuel saving. So it was a bit of a back and forth. It was tricky through the Porsche curves to stay on his tail constantly. I was getting aero loss, and the tyres were starting to go off at that point as well. So it was fairly tricky. But I tried to make up in the slower speed corners where the Porsche has got quite a good drive off the corners. So I was trying to make a bit back there and under braking. But it was a good battle. It was just a shame. I think he went off in Mulsanne corner as well. Actually, I saw him go off behind me, and then didn't really see him again thereafter.
Well, in the end, it seemed to be quite a good race for you, Nick. The next race that we've got, of course, is the IndyCars at Road America. How are you preparing for that one, and what will be your approach for that particular race?
I'll be honest, not even thought about that yet. We've got the 24-hour coming up in 2 weeks. I'm focusing on that first.
Oh well, surely you can savor the results from this one and have a good nice beer at the end of this.
Yeah, I will do. Thank you very much, guys.
Well, cheers, Nick. Well, that was Nick Rowland, ladies and gentlemen, the winner of the GTE category from today's race. And with that, we'll throw back to Justin Prince.
Yes, indeed. Standing by right now with Monar Peter. And Monar, first things first, what came down to the triple stint strategy call in this race with your class?
We were testing, and in testing, it seemed pretty fine. But here, as I said in his interview, I hit a cliff like 4 laps before the end. And after that, it was really hard, especially braking for the corners. It was very easy to lock the front. So I lost some time there.
So what was the game plan for you in that final lap then as the gap closed in? It was talked about by Sai that he had a lot of the hybrid system saved up. What was your situation in that regard for the final lap?
I couldn't really save up my hybrid because their setup was much better on the straights. So I was already using a lot more than him, I think. just to keep him out of my slipstream, or like don't give him a chance to go down my inside. But yeah, I had to save a lot after the Mulsanne chicane. No, not Mulsanne chicane, Mulsanne corner. But he had more, so he got it.
In the end, though, how would you describe overall your experience here in the Major Series in this event today?
I enjoyed it a lot. I did the race 1 year ago as well. I came second there, so I was thinking of winning this, but it was a good race with Sai, and I really enjoyed it. And thanks for Majors to putting this together, and thanks for you guys for the commentator work.
Thank you very much for the time. Congratulations on the podium finish.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. That was Monar Peter coming away with a podium finish today. Held on to the final lap in the LMP1s. It came down to a battle two in the LMP2, as we mentioned. Alexis Fedorov came home in second. Alexis, your fuel call put you ahead by about a few seconds. Talk us through that decision.
I noticed in the first stint.
Alexis, do you have a copy?
What?
We lost you for a split second. Do you have us?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I noticed in the first stint that the track and while I was closing on to Riley because I started only from P7.
I believe we maybe...
The second and third stint, it was quite easy. I had this little gap with him, like I had always one lap.
Overall, though, your team as a whole did a stellar job today, nearly had a full sweep of all the victories today. How does it feel about being a part of that team unit today that's so strong?
Yeah, they were really strong, particularly.
I believe we may be having a technical issue, unfortunately, with Alexis. Apologies to Alexis Fedorov coming home with the second place in the LMP2s. But with that, quick final thoughts, Nolan, before we say goodbye.
I'll tell you what, this has definitely been the most exciting race that I've actually seen here at Le Mans. It's had two of the closest class finishes I've seen at this track for a very long time as well. Of course, with Road America coming up later in the month, actually, with the Indy cars, that's a track that it's basically built to create a good race. So that is one that I cannot wait for as well.
And of that track, Samil, what's your expectations for that when racing goes back underway there in the European region?
Oh, well, just when you get to Road America, and now that iRacing has just updated the current Road America model, you just kind of get some good, hard, and fair and clean road course racing action over there. I think personally, it is one of my favorite circuits when you've got so many fun sections in the track, so many fast and flowing corners, and of course the carousel as well. So there are so many elements that makes Road America the special track that it is. And considering the kind of racing that we've been seeing consistently in the European split of Major Series, I just expect it to be an absolutely superb race over there the next time out. I just can't wait for that one.
Did you enjoy what you've seen today? Be sure to stick around to the iRacing Esports Network later today when GSRC brings you the American split. Be sure to tune in. That's around 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time tonight. But it's time to say goodbye for us here on RaceBot TV. For Nolan Rempo, for Samil Aurora, for Paul Smith, I'm Justin Prince saying so long. Congratulations again to Cy Andra, Riley Thompson, and Nick Rowland for winning your respective classes. We'll see you at Road America.